see ya. So sorry about the delay, everybody. We are here. Thanks for waiting. And take it away, GHAZZY, with the intro.
All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Tavern Talk. We have lost track of which episode this is, but this time we have Jonathan with us yet again to talk about PoE 2. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Obviously the response to the live stream we did was kind of crazy. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what we really expected, but certainly there seems to be a lot of hype. So yeah, it's a bit scary, but I think we're doing pretty well.
Oh, for sure. Big congratulations on the reveal. It was fantastic. Like the intro scene, I think it blew everybody away. Absolutely astonishing. I mean, DM, what do you think about the reveal? Like, I'm rating it at a 12 out of 10 so far. It's been the best one yet.
I mean, obviously everyone liked it. I would say that kind of expected it to be good because I was able to get the early sneak peek and see it in LA earlier on. So when I saw it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is going to be pretty well received. One of my questions I did have for you to go right into it. We're going to do general questions, and then we're going to pretty much almost immediately go into like more specific questions. And these are questions mostly just pulled from the community that they really want the answers to. But one of the general questions that I had for you was, it seems like there's been more and more an emphasis on exploration and world building. In Path of Exile too, you saw things like the skulls on the maps is one such example you've used for this before. So I was kind of hoping you could walk us through the process that happened when you guys started to realize we really want to have more of a focal point on exploration in the game.
So, I mean, to start with the story stuff like that, I mean, we really want to make sure that we're doing better than what we had in PoE 1 with regard to story. Like, a lot of people get through PoE 1 and they never even realize what it is, like what the story even was. But as for exploration as well, I mean, you really want to have that fantasy of well, I mean, you're playing a fantasy game, right? Like and I think exploration is a huge part of that. So there was a thing that happened, in terms of like the icons on the map and everything like that. There was kind of a moment when we realized that people actually didn't realize how much content there was in the game. There was a situation where people would walk past things, they wouldn't know that maps contain stuff. So we're like, okay, when people are dying to bosses all the time, there is stuff out there for them to find. They're just not actually finding it. They don't know that it's there. So the icon on the map thing was just like a really good step towards actually making it so that you realize, oh, you know what? This is actually a game where if I explore, I will be rewarded. And there's been quite a lot of other things like that we've done as well. We've tweaked the random level generator. We've done to make it so that you've got things like where when you come to dead ends, we try to make sure that there's stuff in dead ends for you to find. And of course, there's this the particular encounters that we have, every area we try to have 2. In some cases, there might even be 3, sort of just handmade little things you can find. And we're actually keen to expand on that as well. So one of the things that I'm keen to do is to have a larger pool of these kinds of things in the game than what you get the first time you go through an area, and they can be random. And then we could even consider having it so that when we do when we go between leagues, the set of them that gets picked for each area could be randomly selected from those. We don't have that at the moment, but it's something that I'm very keen to do because I think that obviously replayability, if it's an action RPG, it's a huge thing. By having more of these things, you just want every time you go through the campaign, you just get a feeling of oh, there's stuff here I haven't noticed before. There's stuff there I haven't just little things, and I think those little things really contribute. And we even started doing that a little bit with PoE 1. Once we sort of realized we wanted to do this stuff, even with PoE 1, we started saying, okay, every league when we put one out, we want to have 20, 30 just tiny changes to the campaign that we can do, just so that next time you go through it, you just sort of feel hey, here's just something random that I never noticed before. And I think that's it's funny because it's not really a headline feature. When we're announcing a PoE 1 league, it's not saying, oh, here's a bunch of these little things. It doesn't really get anyone very excited. But I think that when you actually play through it, there's just that feeling of oh man, I never saw that before, and it just kind of gives you just a better experience. So I think that feeling of just just finding random stuff is really important, and we want to do that as much as we can.
That's really funny that you mentioned that because I don't know how many times I've gone through the campaign. I play the game for 10.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I see something new, I'm like, how have I missed this after a decade of playing this game? Because it's not in the patch notes. It's always so surprising.
Yeah.
Guys, you want to go with the...
Yeah, I think we just jump into it. We've made a list here to make sure it's structured because we have a tendency of asking repeat questions in the past. And we're trying to make sure that's not happening this time. So the next question we have we're going to jump into is that the PoE 2 is focused a lot on new player experience, eliminating a lot of requirements for going to third-party tools or third-party sites. And a commonly asked question is that if we're going to be able to search and look up, say, monsters and their abilities in game, sort of like a Necronomicon or Wiki in game, can we expect to see this?
This is something that I'd be super keen to do, especially because of the fact that some of the monster models are so awesome. You don't really get to appreciate them from game camera perspective. Like, so like every weekend, my friends come over, and I like to show them like, hey, here's what we've been doing on PoE2 recently. But the thing is, I've got the tools. I can like open up what's called the asset viewer and like, hey, look at this cool monster, and like show them close up and like, hey, look at. And there's also the funny things. Like the animators make all these idle animations for the monsters that you basically never see. Like with a bunch of character to them and stuff like that are really awesome, and the players never see them because obviously you never see a monster not attacking you. So like there's all sort of stuff. So one day, and we don't have this in the game right now, but one day I am very keen to make an actual sort of bestiary, of like here's all the monsters in the game, but like we can actually see the model and like appreciate it a little bit, and then obviously when you do that, then that would be a great opportunity to be able to show like all various abilities and things like that. It would be sort of handy, I think, for people who are wanting to play specters and to be able to have a big list of all that stuff. So I think that'll be a really cool thing to do one day. But yeah, we don't have it at the moment. I just think it'll be really awesome to kind of show off the work of the artists who have made all these awesome monsters. And like, yeah, some of them are really kind of gruesome. Like there's this random guy, just to pick a random example, called a pale fishman. And it's like this tiny little thing on screen that you barely even see. But if you like zoom into the model, it's like this crazy like warped thing between a human and a one of those anglerfish with the like dangling light thing on it.
Yeah.
And like when you look at it real close, you can see there's like a sort of screaming person kind of under there that like there's a mouth, and like the idle animation like is like kind of crazy with like all this like, yeah, like there's just stuff like that in there that it's like like you really don't appreciate that when you just like blast past it and kill it in like half a second because it's just some random small monster. So yeah, it'd be cool for people to see that stuff.
What was the name of that? Because we can get the idle animation when we race it as a Spectre. That's
true. It was called a pale fishman. I actually don't even know if it's in the early access because I think it might be an Act 4 monster. Yeah, in fact, and the other thing as well is when I give names like these are like internal code names. That's like the name of the folder that someone put it in, rather than like the actual like lore name in the game. So I don't know if it'll even be called that in the final version, but yeah, it's just it's pretty interesting to see some of that stuff.
And speaking,
I'll see if I can find it.
Speaking of animations, I'm going to go off script here from our list already and ask you about the cinematic. Was something that I wanted to make sure I ask you about, because it's kind of the first, full like major cinematic that has really been revealed so far. So, was it difficult doing your first cinematic, and did you guys get the result and the response you were really hoping for?
Absolutely. So yes, it was definitely very hard. I mean, obviously we've never done anything like that before. Like I sort of had to. I mean, I wrote it myself, and there was a New Zealand company who we commissioned to kind of to work on it. And they've done obviously some cool stuff before, but I don't think they'd ever done like a thing that's this long, like on the sort of scale, I guess. So that was certainly, like, I mean, they did a really good job, right? Like it's really awesome. But yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of like. I was really concerned, right? Because obviously the comparison is to like Blizzard and all the crazy cinematics like that. And to be honest, like the quality of the animation is not what Blizzard does, right? Like, I mean, they, like we do a lot of things in order to make it so that like it is like, I want the content to be really awesome, but it's like in terms of just the raw, like, like amount of millions of dollars that they probably spend on their cinematics, right? Like we're not at that level. So we're not there. But I was really hoping that you could get a feeling of like the world and the kind of, I want to make sure that people understand right from the word go that like there is a brutality here. And like we're not sort of pulling any punches when it comes to the kind of things you can expect in the game. So that was kind of what I was going for. And the thing that I actually based it on is I was thinking a lot about the Riddick movies.
Yes.
Where you've kind of got the thing that, the classic like a team of guys go in all overconfident and then they get picked off one by one. That's kind of what I was imagining. Is like, okay, how are we going to do this? And so that's kind of what I was thinking about as we were writing it.
I love that Riddick series. That was the first movie I introduced my fiance to when we first met.
Right. Yeah,
probably not the best choice.
And also it also has that sort of idea of the flip of like the you've got the team you're following are like the bad guys, but you kind of think of them as like but they're kind of yet the main protagonists, and it's like you get that flip at the end where you realize that the bad guy hunting them all is actually the good guy. So I was pretty happy with that one as well.
Pretty well done. It's pretty well done.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next question. For clarification, this is a kind of a big one, a couple of mini questions in it. So for clarification, can you explain how deaths in map work? Because
Mhm.
there's been some confusion on why 6 portals, if you die, you can't go back in, as well as experience penalty still being a thing. So we'll start with those two.
Yeah, so basically, when you die in a map, you can't resurrect in the map. And I think that is okay. Like we discussed this quite a lot, right? Because we were like, we've got 6 portals, we could have it so that you can revive 6 times like you did in PoE1. But the thing we were really worried about is just compromising the combat. Like we just really don't want to make it so that you just effectively, like, I mean, obviously there's a limited level of cheese, but it's still cheese on the boss as far as we were concerned. So the reason for 6 portals is it's still important that you're able to pull out 6 inventories worth of items from a map if you're by yourself. Like you still want to be able to do that. And yet we also don't want to make it just one portal with unlimited uses, because once again, that limitation on like the amount of stuff you can pull out of a map, I think, is also kind of one of those things that's important. And there's also a slightly more mundane reason, which like seems a bit silly, but all the map devices that we've already sold, those are microtransactions that we need to support going forward in the store, and all of those have 6 portals. We can't really change that, so that's kind of just like one of those things that we just kind of have to maintain backwards compatibility for that reason. So yeah, there was a lot of discussion around this though, but at the end of the day, the main thing that won out as far as is we just don't want to compromise the combat. We want to make sure that if you're going to kill a boss, it has to be like one life. You have to survive it. You actually have to properly kill it. But of course, we can make those encounters harder because of the fact we don't have a map boss in every area. So we get to ideally have that still being fine.
What about experience penalty when dying? Is that still going to be a thing with us?
That's actually a very good question. So we removed it from the campaign at the point where we made it so that we added checkpoints and everything. And then at the time, we were like, oh, but in maps, you get 6 portals, so therefore we still don't have it. Now, it's still there right now, but it's not something I've like thought about, honestly, for like a little while now. So it's probably good that I have another conversation with Mark about it just to see whether we still need it. The reason why I think I would still like it is because it's not really at the beginning of maps, but as you get towards the race towards 100, having death like set you back so that you have to actually build somewhat defensively when you're like racing for 100, I think is kind of important. So the experience penalty is really serving a really important role there. But I suppose the question is like it may not be as necessary when you're talking early maps, right? Like it's really that from like 90 to 100 where it kind of starts to matter that the death penalty is there as a thing. So we could theoretically think about like I mean basically what I'm saying with that is like we could fiddle around with the equation for it a little bit, but yeah, the purpose of it really is to make sure that as you're coming towards the end, as you're getting to level 100, that like a mistake actually costs you something rather than just being like a nothing in the road. In order for that race to 100 to actually be meaningful, because like if you can just grind your face into the wall and still not losing experience and just like die, it's like you get to 100 but you died like 2,000 times. It's like, well, did you really achieve the same thing as the guy who didn't die at all? So that's kind of the reason why it exists.
That's a fair answer. The follow-up questions to this little chunk we got here is loot. And what happens when you're going in a party play in maps, and what happens to the loot there in the loot split between the parties, as well as what happens if X player dies? What is the loot to that player?
All right, so okay, a few things about this. So number one, we have changed how the loot scaling works for party members. And what we've actually tried to do is be a lot more intelligent with regard to what types of items do you want to see more of, and what types of items don't matter about having more of. So an example of this is like, if you're talking about currency, right? Obviously you want double the amount of currency when we've got 2 players because all players want to take currency. But this is also true for things like rings and amulets, because rings and amulets aren't kind of like specific to any one like person, right? Like I mean, obviously the mods can make them that way, but everyone wants a ring, everyone wants an amulet if one drops. So effectively, we also do plus 100% for things like that as well. But if you're talking about armors, well, there are 6 different armor types, and so if you look on average, you only need to increase the number of armors by 50% in order to be able to. Wait, is it even 50%? It might be. I might be doing the math wrong here, but effectively, there's an amount of armor increase that you need in order to kind of, on average, make it so that everyone's still getting the stuff they want, because certain players only want certain armor parts of the pie, right, due to the strength, dex, int thing. And for weapon types, there's even more weapon types. So the chance that 2 players are actually using the same weapon type is generally much lower. So effectively what that means is that we can not increase weapons by the same amount that we increase other stuff. So what that means is that when you, the sum total of all of that means that the stuff on the ground from each player increases by some number like 28% if you actually look at it in raw drops. But the actual what makes up that 28% is like way more of the stuff you actually want and not as much of the garbage that you don't want, in order to make it so that you don't get the crazy spam on the ground with party play that you previously might have gotten. So I think that system works very well in terms of just making it so that you get the right items. And I guess it just goes to the general philosophy that we have of we're trying to not drop as many things, but make sure the things we do drop are more important and better as you go up. So that's kind of like the as I said, just part of that philosophy there. I feel like there was another part of the question that I've forgotten now, so maybe you can remind me what it was.
The last part there's two more, but one of them was let's say you're two players playing and one player dies. What happens to the loot on the ground that belongs to that player?
So I think that we usually use temporary. I think temporary allocation is still. I'm pretty sure the rules for this are basically the same as what they were in PoE 1, at least at the moment. So basically, if you've got temporary allocation on, then the allocation will disappear, and then the loot will just become allocated to be free for all once the timer expires. And if it's permanent allocation, then obviously it stays like that. Although we definitely should make it free for all once you die, even if it's permanent. I assume. I don't know if we've actually done that. It does work that way. In that case, it'll just work then. So it's just the same as in PoE 1 in this regard. So that should be fine. I mean, effectively like that. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's like changed a huge amount in that particular regard. So actually, what was the last part there?
Last one has to do with trials. Now, we've only seen Sanctum and Ultimatum version, the 2.0 version of it. So the real question is two ones. One is the Sanctum no-hit run, and the questions are, what happens if one player dies, if two players goes in, and the other one is the reward system there as well, I guess.
Okay, so this is one of these tricky technical questions that Mark would probably be better at answering because he knows the exact details. So let me think about that. I don't know that I've even had a discussion about what happens to the rewards in Sanctum. Now, generally speaking, of course, when we're doing things like this, when you're paying party play with a thing like Sanctum, the map, to be technical, the map owner, but effectively the person who paid the cost, the person who put the key in, they're the person who kind of gets like the progress. So they usually get to be the one who decides what actions to take and what rooms to go to. I believe though that if you want to go through and ascend, that you can both do the ascendancy. So that means if you want to do like the ascension in a party, then that's absolutely fine. You get the reward there. But I believe that the items that come from like key, the chests and stuff like that, I believe that they belong to the person who paid the cost of the coin that they used to enter. Is my understanding of that. I could be wrong about this, but I think that's correct. So there's a few. I'm sorry about this. I don't have like completely clear information about some of that stuff, but that's one of those things that Mark tends to be often addressing as far as working out those things. Mark really is like so. One thing I should mention is that Mark plays like. I could be wrong about this, but I think like 90% of the time when he's playtesting multiplayer, so he's the one who really cares about getting all that multiplayer stuff exactly right. Whereas when I'm playing, I'm like a solo player all the way, right? Like for whatever reason, I'm just like a solo player. So ideally with the both of us paying attention here, we should make sure that things are good in both solo and multiplayer. But he's got a bunch of designers he likes to play with. Like the design team effectively. Like he plays multiplayer with the design team all the time. So he's the one who usually sorts out these like specific little multiplayer details.
So since we're talking about loot, there is one question that people had related to loot due to some early access footage we've seen where there's like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 advanced gear, etc. So I was hoping you could break down what that's referencing.
Yeah, so effectively, when you get magic find gear, so like increased chance of rarity, we wanted to try and make it so that the gear that you get from that is better, and not just in the way of just getting like more rares. I mean, it does do that as well, don't get me wrong, like you're still getting more rares, more uniques and so on, but we wanted to make it so that you could scale rarity by a huge amount, not necessarily in a character, but also because when you've got a monster that you've juiced with various map mechanics, all of that stuff is adding rarity and not quantity. So effectively we need to make sure that rarity is something that really increases the power. So the way we do that is there's 5, and I don't know whether Rishi will be unhappy about me spoiling the exact inner workings of this, but there are 5 tiers to start with that you can't see, that change anything, because those don't change anything about unidentified items, but they do change the percentage chances that you get certain things. So they, for example, you're getting chances to upgrade currency to higher types of currency. You're getting like the chances of not not spawning items with base types that are lower level than what you would need. So effectively sort of clamping the base types that you're going to get into like a smaller range at the top, and like these kind of things, while also increasing like magic and rare and uniques and stuff like that. It also increases the like it starts to open up like those tiers start to open up like what types of uniques can go into the pool. And to be clear here, there's always a chance that you can upgrade through these tiers regardless of how much magic find you have, right? You don't need magic find to get this. It's just that magic find is effectively increasing the chance that you upgrade through them. And in total, there's actually 10 tiers overall. But at tier 5, it starts to modify the properties of unidentified items, and that's why we have to start marking the rares as being like, and so that's when when it says T2, that actually means that's like T5 internally of what it's rolled, and then so the tiers going up from there, each of them say T2, T3, T4, T5, and what the reason why we have to say that is because when this item dropped, we clamped the mods that it can get to be in the upper tiers, and the higher tier you get, the higher that can go. So if you get a T5 rare, the mods that it can have are from a very, very tiny portion of them, right at the top of all the tiers of those mods. So you know that the rolls you're going to be seeing, like the life you're going to get on it, the damage you're going to get on it, this kind of thing, are going to be top notch when you see that. So effectively, the reason why I think that's important to show is because you kind of want people to feel like, okay, like, because the number of items that drop aren't really increasing, you need a way to see on the screen when something drops, like how valuable is the thing that I just saw. And so showing those tiers on the rares also really has that effect of like, okay, like if you see like, 5 or 6 T5 rares drop, you got a really good hit. Whereas if you see a bunch of like T2s, you didn't get such a good one. So that's kind of important, I think, just to get that feeling of being important. It's actually really interesting because we've been fighting so much this thing of like the way that you made a way you can make drops in an action RPG feel good is just by dropping tons of crap on the ground. But the problem is that like it really is kind of an annoying element because like while it can feel good, it's like it's just it people want then they want to use loot filters and they want to use all that stuff, and it's like, okay, well, I mean, that's great and everything, and we'll support that, and that's fine. But like ideally we can actually make it so that you don't have to worry about it in the first place. And so you need to find a way to give people the hit of dopamine without having to just do that by like literally covering the screen. Now, I mean, there's still room for like dropping a lot of stuff, right? I mean, like we want to make sure bosses feel like, there's a good list of stuff there. But it's like ideally you get that by the value of the items, like that the value of that stuff is really good. And I suppose on some level item filters are even sort of achieving that anyway, because if you're using a filter to get like, you're not seeing very much anyway. So it really is all about the value. So it's not like it's impossible. We just need to make sure that the game is doing that as a matter of course rather filters. Oh, sorry, did that.
Oh, you're good. You only lost you the last half second there. But
okay, all good. Yeah.
So since you bring up the concept of loot filters, this was a question we were going to ask later, so I might as well bring it up now. Is that like official confirmation loot filters? Sounds like are supported.
Yeah. Yeah, so they're supported in exactly the same way they were in PoE 1. There's no reason for us to drop support for something like that. If you want to use them, you can. And I suspect what the main reason people will use them for in PoE 2 is not so much filtering things away, but more highlighting things that are valuable that you might not otherwise recognize, because like they might be higher base types or things like that. Like a lot of people have filters that highlight certain things that might be good for various reasons. So, things that have, like some, for example, people might like want to be doing things like, like I know that this, like things like, items having sockets and stuff, maybe you want to change the text color when that happens or things like that. Like there are icons and stuff for that stuff there, but we try to keep things like relatively visually clean. And also we don't want to try to make too many value judgments for the player about what is important or not. So therefore we try to like not do too much of that stuff, but obviously players, come up with their own schemes for what they think is important. So then I suspect they'll use loot filters mostly for the ability to change how loot is rendered as opposed to filtering it out.
I gotta say, this isn't so much a question as much as a comment for me personally, but I really appreciate the approach of something you said there, which is allowing the player to determine what's important. I find that to be like a very appealing sentiment. So when I hear that, it's kind of the reason I've been falling in love with the PoE game lately. But anyway, on to the next question here. So this one is going to be an obvious one. If I didn't ask it, everyone would be mad. So there's 6 classes that are coming to early access. Some of them have already been showcased, but they're not in there, namely the Druid and the Huntress. So I think people are curious about, are they coming soon? What's going on with these classes?
Yeah, so they'll definitely be coming relatively soon. I'm not going to promise a date, but certainly the next two classes you see will be those two, like in terms of in early access. We just at some point, look, we really wanted to launch with those two classes. We expected that we would be launching into early access with those two classes, but at some point it was just like, we and I think I've even said this before, but we really underestimated what it takes to finish a class. I think, it takes a lot. It's because and the thing is, it's like you make a bunch of skills and you're like, oh yeah, made the skills. That's the class, right? But in PoE it really isn't because you need to make sure they can all be supported well. You need to make sure there's uniques that support it. There's passive tree stuff that supports it. It's like a whole thing of like getting all that stuff into a good state. It's like plus also the skills, plus also thinking about all the stuff that can happen with other classes and like how does it tie in with all the mechanics. Like it's just a Goliath task. So I think the Huntress and the Druid are not far away. The Druid, we still have one form that we still need to get finished. There's there's still some more skill work to do there. The Huntress, I think we mostly have like working prototypes that we're happy with for most of the skills, but like there's still a little bit more to do. But yeah, it's just all that other sort of finishing work around like tying it into all the other systems, making sure everything's good that we need to get done. And it won't take us too long, but at some point we just had to say like, hey, can we really do this for early access with all the other stuff that we're doing? And we just felt like we couldn't. So, we decided to cut for now, get to it later. And, we make these kinds of decisions all the time. There's like a ton of content that's like, we're trying to get it in. We try as hard as we can. And then we're like, oh, you know what? We just couldn't get it in. But I think, that's just game development, right? But the nice thing is it's all sitting there, right? We don't throw anything away. We've got it all there waiting in the wings, which means that there'll be a bunch of content we'll be able to introduce really quickly.
Speaking
when
of...
you say one forum... Yeah, like when you say one forum, could you give us a number? How many forums are we talking about?
So there's three primary forms for the Druid, but there's a couple of other like random shapeshifts around, that kind of. I mean, you actually saw one of them, right? There's the shapeshift on the Ascendancy, the demon form. So there's a few other things, bits and pieces like that around the place, but the Druid sort of has three primary forms, and that's because we want to try and like the other classes, we want to make sure that there's combos between the forms as well. It's not just like a reskin melee, right? Like each of the forms kind of has like skills that have like things, and we want to make sure there's mechanics between them that they can kind of you get the cross class kind of even within the archetypes of the class synergy like that. So the one that no, maybe I'm not going to spoil it. Actually, yeah, I'm not going to say anything about it.
Go on, spoil
it.
You're more than welcome to.
So this is probably a good time to ask this thing because you're talking about the additional classes here. Does that mean we can basically expect changes to the passive skill tree? Because obviously there's the 6 starting nodes now, so when you add the other classes, there's going to be new branches, I'm assuming, added for each one of these classes at this point, or were they going to double down on previous ones?
So I'm sure the passive tree will receive massive renovations all through early access. Like I just have no doubt of that. It's every time we change anything, huge passive tree changes are a result. It's taken a long time to iterate to even the point we are now, and I'm just sure there'll be more. And like the thing is until you really play it like properly, you just don't even know what's missing. Actually, one other thing I might mention, just because I don't know if it's like hugely well known, but the starting area of the tree for each class actually changes. There's actually 3 variants of the starting part of each tree for each class. So effectively, we actually did this first when we were playing the Witch and the Sorceress. So effectively, if you're a witch, you get one variant of the starting area, and if you're a sorceress, you get another variant. And then if you're neither of those two classes, then there's a third variant that can go there, so that all the other classes, when they go there, they get slightly different stats again. The reason for that is because the initial reason we did the witch sorceress thing is because there's this problem that you have with where players, when they see a node that's got multiple things on it and one of the things does not affect them, people just really don't want to allocate a node like that, even if the values on it are the same as what they otherwise would have gotten. So when we first did this, when we had one variant for everyone, the witch sorceress nodes were like plus 8% or whatever minion and spell damage, right? And we found that sorceresses, even though a sorceress would otherwise get just 8% spell damage, sorceresses would just not take that because it's got this minion thing on it and they don't want that. So by having the trees be separate, it just sort of prevents that problem immediately. And the other thing it kind of also was just like, when we realized that we could swap those two out, we're like, well, hang on, we might as well have a third variant as well for other players, because that will mean that there are some times when we have like balance things that are a bit annoying, where like we can't make a node for a class in the starting area as good as we want, because that would mean that other classes would all be incentivized to go there and take it because it's like too powerful, if you know what I mean. So effectively with that, we can like balance the because it's relatively close to get to the adjacent classes area. So effectively you can sort of just balance that so that it like kind of works a little bit better. So there's not going to be anything in the starting areas that you like don't like stats you just can't otherwise get, right? It's not going to be like that, but it's just more about like tweaking numbers and a few cases like the Sorceress and Witch where we just have to make sure that, you know, for new player clarity, we can make sure that it's like just the stuff they're going to want and not the stuff for the other class. But as you get out of that, then they all become the same. But yeah, as I said, we'll be making a lot more changes as we go through too.
That was a very in-depth answer there. I actually didn't know about the changing of the starts. That's that's an interesting tidbit there. Okay, so you did mention, and you know I got to ask, because you said classes and content coming to the game. I am a notable Blight enjoyer. So, you know I'm going to ask, can we hope, can you tease me with anything, give me some hopium copium that, you know, maybe Blight can come to Path of Exile 2 at some point here?
Well, I will say this. Blight is a relatively easy league to add compared to some others. So when we're looking at leagues of like, here are some leagues that we can put in like relatively easily, that is one of the ones that would be relatively simple for us to do. Obviously, one of the reward system it previously had has now been moved to a different thing, which means that Blight will need a new reward system, and we've got ideas for what we can do about that. But we've got monsters we can use for it. We've actually got a bunch of environment art from Act 5 that would suit Blight perfectly well. I'm not sure if have we shown any of that? No, I don't think we have. All right, yeah. Well, anyway, there's some stuff that we can use very easily. So it's the kind of thing that we could do relatively easily when we're looking to add new leagues to the game.
So I'm just hearing Blight login. That's what I'm hearing when you're saying. Okay, well that's good. That's good news. I'll pass it off to GHAZZY because I've been asking a bunch of questions related to stuff I just personally wanted to know.
Oh, that's fine. Later on in this podcast, we're going to hit the minion rant section, so don't worry about it. But we can start with a classic simple answer question, and it is, how many ascendancy points are we going to get in total?
Yeah, so same as PoE 1, it's 8 points. So effectively you've got the last three you can get throughout campaign, three sets of 2, I should say. So 6 points throughout campaign, and then the last one you have to be in game to be able to get.
All right. The other question we have here is, PoE 2 looks like there's a significant amount of ways to increase power on maps. How does the juicing compare to PoE 1 for endgame mapping? Now, we saw a lot of it in the reveal, but could you elaborate on it?
Well, so first things first, we definitely want to make sure that juicing is still a thing, right? Like before we did our whole endgame push, I think that in recent times, I think that would have been a big problem that we would have had, where there wasn't enough ways to juice maps. But I don't know that you'll be able to get to quite the level that you can get in PoE 1. Certainly, we want to make sure that it's big though, and like it's honestly. It's a little bit hard to say because, the way that this can go down, I mean, look, we think we can know like all the things, but you never really quite know exactly how it goes until you get like masses of players, because trade is a huge part of the economy for how juicing works. Like, it's like, okay, so we've shown people how you can overlap tablets and towers and all these sorts of things like that and like get all these packs. But the question is the sustainability in a trade league such that you can like do all of the juicing mechanics that PoE 2 has to offer at the same time continuously? And I don't actually quite know the answer to that because, as I said, it's really a trade economy thing that you need to have to be able to say what they can do. And the juice is substantial if you can get everything all at the same time. The question is, can you do that every map or can you do that only some of the time? And I honestly can't say until the trade sort of starts to happen. I think it's going to come down a lot to just play and for us to just find out, like once we hit that trade economy, we actually start playing. What does it feel like? Is it working well? But the thing is, we still want you to feel powerful, and part of the feeling of power actually is pack size, right? Like you need to have enough pack size so that because when you've got a bunch of AoE abilities, obviously the more things they hit, the more damage you're effectively doing overall. So like the more pack size really is like a way to make a player feel powerful, and so that's why we need to have ways of juicing pack size, and we've got ways of juicing pack size in the game. But then we also have to be a little bit careful because that is what can lead to things getting completely out of control and then just you can't understand what's going on in the combat and things just completely fall apart. So as I said, we have to be careful, but I think it is still substantial. Like you still need to feel like a god. So I think the juice will be high, but I do believe it should be lower than PoE 1 at least by a little bit.
That's fair. On the topic of power and
Mhm.
juicing things up.
Mhm.
It's something that we've seen in many games throughout the years, is how games start, ARPG games, they start off kind of slow
Mhm.
and more of a strategic gameplay approach. And then the best patches comes through, the game
Mhm.
evolves,
Mhm.
the meta of power creeping and speed clearing just goes to crazy numbers.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then everyone's upset when they're then toned down or the number squish is happening.
Mhm.
So I guess the follow-up question would be, if what are the plans? Because I'm very confident there are plans to manage severe increase in power creep moving forward, so you don't end up in that category where you're one-shotting the entire screen.
I think that we just have to be careful. And honestly, I would say that in PoE 1, we've shown that we can. I mean, look, PoE 1 obviously did get pretty crazy, but at the same time, like, we had a lot of years, where things kind of weren't like that. And I think that effectively, I believe we can still maintain that. Our numbers don't scale as fast as some games do, and they don't go quite as exponential, which means that we're not going to have to be worrying about trillions of damage or anything like that. Having, and like, I mean, it can be. So I don't think we're going to have to ever do a number squish or anything like that. Like, we've never really felt like the need to worry about that. Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of keeping on top of it. And there are certain people in the company who just, are just very careful about stuff. So I mentioned Rishi a couple of times. Like, he's kind of the one who does most of the work for the item system and so on. So he is definitely a force of conservativeness when it comes to when it comes to like making sure that things don't go crazy. And so that's really good to have, because it means that like me and Mark are often the ones being like, no, numbers high, and he's like, no, keep them low, keep them low. So I think together with that, we kind of come to some kind of medium ground where we don't get things too out of control. Yeah, as I said, I think that it's just a matter of just being careful. One nice thing that we also have is with the league format that we have is that we get to add power, and then at the end of the league we get to decide, like, was that too much? Can we take some of this away? Do we want to keep it? That kind of stuff. Like, that's a very important tool. So we kind of never really like. It means we don't have to commit to things in the same way that a game that didn't have a league type process does, because the expectation from players, and I think this is almost sort of a community thing, the expectation from the community is not necessarily that all the content that we add is going to stay added. And I think that's a really important factor to have an understanding of in a game community, because it just gives us so much more ability to like make decisions after testing them. It's funny, like, I say that as if, oh yeah, you just test all of your stuff on the players, but I mean, to some extent that's true, and because you never really know. Like, you can do all the testing you want, but you never really know until the community actually get a chance to play with it and you see what kind of stuff comes out of it. So yeah, I mean, on some level, we really are testing the stuff on the community, and it has to be that way. I just don't know of a way, like, no matter how many QA testers we throw at it, I don't think we could find every single possible level of power that can come out of something like that. So yeah, like, it's just nice that we have the ability to say, you know what, this thing here, we're going to put it back in, but we're going to nerf it, or this thing here, just, it can't exist. Like, it interacts with too many other things and it's too broken. It's really nice to be able to say that.
Kind of a random question that I have due to the years. You mentioned this in I think it was the Ziggy Q&A afterwards, but that the early access server is going to be maintained. So meaning you're going to have leagues, separate, but then the OG one will go back there, and that is going to be separate from like the Eterno or core server as well, right? There will be an early access one. So a question for you I have then is, the early access characters, one, I'm assuming you can still, play them, etc. on the server, and two, can you still create characters on the early access server afterwards, or are they kind of grandfathered in and make sure you have all the characters you want for the server?
I think we probably won't allow you to create new characters there, just because I think that even just if you're a new player and you're like, oh, you've got place. I mean, I suppose what we could do is allow you to create characters there if you've already got one there. That would be an option. But I kind of don't really think we need to do that. Like, as I said, the main reason we're doing that is just because if you're someone who's like not even really paying attention to what's going on, and you're just like, you've got some level 20 character and you're like, oh, I just want to keep playing the game, right? Like, we don't want to disrupt that person's life too much. So I think that's why we don't want to just get rid of all that stuff completely. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, though, that, like, if you're playing a high-level character, almost certainly your build is going to be bricked in some regard, right? Like, there'll be some element of it that got modified or something like that, But then, of course, you'll also have, like, legacy items, which will be kind of presumably funky, assuming that we have to modify balance, which no doubt we will have to do. Yeah, like, you'll have all that stuff too. So, I mean, look, there's just no reason to delete the data, right? Like, we're not going to make an effort to make sure that everything is, like, still works, like, in terms of your builds and everything, but we're also not going to do anything that we don't have to do in terms of deleting it either, right? Like we might as well just let it be there. And it's also just like nice to have like, oh, here's this character I got, back in the day. Like it's nice to just have that around. So, it's just a little memory of that. So there's just no reason for us to delete it.
So speaking of builds getting bricked, if I reference one of the interviews we actually did on here, is you had mentioned Righteous Fire as an example when we were talking about cosmetics and MTX, and you were saying that it's fundamentally getting changed. And I was hoping to ask for Pox here. Shout out to Pox. Can we get any information related to Righteous Fire or where that is going? I was kind of wanting to follow up with that you had mentioned in the previous.
So it's not an early access right now because it's on a class that is not. It's one of the skills for a class that's not going to be an EA. So you get that a little bit later. But it is going to be in. We have a prototype of it, and we've got it working a way that we're happy for it to work. Unfortunately, just not an EA, or at least not an EA at the start. Right when we add the character, it'll come in.
It's going to be in significantly changed, or
it is very it is very different.
Okay,
but it's still fundamentally. It's still fundamentally a thing where you're lighting yourself on fire and there's fire damage around you and that kind of stuff, right? It's just that, like the exact mechanics from a stat point of view. Like, if you looked at it on the screen, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's Righteous Fire. But if you look at the stats, it's like works quite differently.
There we go. Thank you. I had to ask for Pox.
Fair enough.
Speaking of bricking, a very common question. I believe this was shown in the reveal, but bricking the Atlas, as you can, if you die in a map, you can't do it again. So in the start, what happens when you brick all the start
around? Yeah. So we have the ability to effectively restart your Atlas. If you completely cut yourself off, you can do that. I don't remember what way it is to do that, but it certainly came up when we were first talking about it. There just has to be some way to allow you to effectively restart your Atlas from scratch if you need to. I would hope that most people don't do that. I should hope that you manage to survive it. So there's 4 connections to the starting point. So you'd have to die 4 times in a row in order for that to happen to you. And then if that happens, it'll automatically re-roll the Atlas, so you can kind of just try again immediately. But hopefully not too many players have to do that and run into that issue. Look, we wanted there to be consequences for failure, right? We wanted to, so it's like, oh crap, now I have to find another way around. Like the web of connections is dense enough that usually there'll be some other way around to get to something that you want. But bear in mind, there won't be too many, right? Like if you then die in another one of the entrances to get to some piece of content, that could definitely cut you off. So there are some consequences for death. Like and with that in mind, it obviously means that things like the experience penalty at low levels, certainly we don't need to be as worried about, because there's consequences just from the death itself in the Atlas. But I think it's just the other reason why it's also important to do that, by the way, is because of the fact that you can fail a map. It means that the things that we can have on the Atlas can be more valuable, right? Because if we have things that you can just try again, then you've always got these problems where, like, okay, if you go into the map, like let's say you wanted to have a map and it's just full of chests that drop stuff for whatever reason. Let's just say we want to do that, right? It's like if the failure, it really has to be that you can only enter that map. They can only create that map one time. Because otherwise, at what point do you say, well, the map is completed? There always has to be things, like there always has to be some kind of condition like that. So by effectively just having the rule of like a map can only be created by you one time, it means that the valuable stuff we can put on there, like monsters and things like that. Like if you can have mods on the Atlas that are like increases the number of rares by a ton, and that's fine because you know that you don't have a situation where someone just kills half of them and then dies on purpose and then goes back in and kills them again. That kind of stuff. Like effectively, that's the kind of exploit that we're trying to avoid here, and so it just allows us to have much more valuable stuff on there. We do, by the way, have a bit of this problem in campaign that we have to worry about, because you can respawn at checkpoint at any time, and so we have to be really careful about this stuff because I mentioned before that at the end of dead ends you'll get rare chests. Well, if you can set it, like we had an exploit before we fixed it, where if you get a checkpoint that's close to a rare chest because it's at a dead end, you can die on purpose, respawn at the checkpoint, just open the chest again and again.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. So effectively, what we have to do is make it so that when you revive from a checkpoint, all of the things like chests and rare monsters, they have to stay dead even if you opened them or killed them after you did the checkpoint, for the next version until you recreate the map and do it from scratch again, because that stuff would be exploitative if you were able to, to not save that after you died. So there's like a few little things we have to worry about with the checkpoints for exploits of that, but thankfully in maps you don't, because there's no, you don't have to worry about that element, since if you die,
I have a follow-up to that, because I felt like when I tested the campaign, now the game is very different from when I play tested it last time in LA, and there was one mechanic, and I kept saying gearing and getting skill gems, it felt so good. I felt like I always were given the tools I needed when I was progressing, and I had no idea about the mechanic till you told me at the event about this loot table rare that randomly was generated in the area, and if you didn't kill it, that would be available in the next zone to give you like an appropriate flask. So I'm guessing that feature is also for this. You can't farm that, I'm guessing. But a lot of people don't know about it, so maybe you can elaborate on it.
Yeah, so effectively what we've done in the very, very early game, in order to make it so that to guarantee a certain number of skills and things like that, is that there's a couple of encounters where if you fail to find the encounter in the first area, for example, then when you go to the second area, we will drop the item that you would have gotten if you'd found that first encounter, just to make sure that if you didn't run into this, but you did run into a later one, then we like forward that on to the next area. And then we do that like a couple of times with a few different encounters. It's kind of all stuff like in the first like sort of 10 levels, this kind of stuff, just to really make sure that like people actually get some of those important drops. Like when you're level sort of 15, 20, missing out on one skill gem is like not really a big deal. But when you're really low level and it's like you've got very few skills, if you miss out on that crucial upgrade of getting like the next tier of gem, that can matter so much that we just can't really allow it to happen. So we need to have as many chances as possible for people to find those things. But at the same time, we didn't want to just spam you with that type of gem, because then it's like, oh, I've got tons of these. Well, like it would feel wouldn't feel very valuable if you did find them all. So we want to all of those encounters. They do have loot that you get. Like there's still a reason to do all of them because they have their own unique stuff as well. But effectively, if you do miss some of them, you're still getting some of those really crucial things like skill gem upgrades and things like that in those first few areas. I actually think, though, that some of that problem might be slightly ameliorated by the fact that we've got the map now where you can see all the encounters. So I think that in some cases people might be looking at there. But we still have that system just because, it's nice to be able to, to just make sure that people don't fail in the very early game.
So speaking of the map, I got just a couple of questions related to the map. One is when we're talking about breaking the map and not being able to go to certain areas if you fail too many. Does this account for like bosses too? For instance, like pinnacle bosses, and are they linked together where you fail the maps around it, you cannot go do the boss now?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not
because
me.
If you fail, the cities with the Uber bosses, those are extra special because if you fail one of those, if you fail to kill the lieutenant, then the boss will disappear from the Uber boss will disappear from the center of the city as well. So those ones are like you really have to be able to do those fights, and it will be quite challenging. That one, of course, is extra challenging because you need to find another city, right? That one's going to be something that I think will be quite challenging. So yeah, like that's for like the ultra pinnacle content, like that 7th system, which has I don't want to say the name because we didn't spoil it, but that pinnacle boss encounter, that one will be quite hard to get to.
Okay, so speaking of pinnacle boss encounters, got a couple more questions related to this. Are the bosses? I hear there's what you said, tier 1 through 4, correct?
You're talking about in terms of loot drops and things like that. I think I've talked about this before.
In terms of difficulty ramping, I don't think that we got clarity on whether or not you can modify these maps. Meaning, can you like further modify the?
Sorry, you're talking about different. Okay, so you're talking about the trees at the end where you add the difficulty. Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. So yes, there's 4 tiers. Yes, that's correct.
And so beyond that, can you modify the bosses themselves? Are the bosses static and you modify on your tree only, or are the bosses almost like maps? You know how you can modify like invites, for instance, from PoE 1. So can you further modify these?
Let me think about that. So generally speaking, not. So I'm pretty sure the Breachstone can't get mods. Can Simulacrums get mods? I don't know. I'm not actually sure.
No problem.
The ultimatum ones can, because those ones have that extra mechanic for modifying him. I'm actually not entirely. So look, what I'll say is in general, it's not like it isn't the same for every league. Like for each league, we can decide what we want to do there. But generally speaking, for those 4 in-game things, the main thing you're going to be doing is modifying the difficulty using the tree like that. And that difficulty scaling does introduce things like, it can even modify things like how skills work and like, the number of minions that a boss might summon and things like that. Like there's all sorts of stuff like that, but it isn't random what you're doing there on the tree. So for the pinnacles, it really is just kind of mostly just that difficulty change.
Okay, got it. I think the reason people were asking is they were wondering if like there's a hardest baseline challenge where it's like this is sort of a baseline you can use on can you clear the hardest content. So people were wanting some clarity on that.
For the pinnacle boss, it definitely is the case.
Okay, thank you very much. So another question I was kind of wondering when I was looking at the map, I noticed you use the example of like the paradise, for instance, you get the bonus experience, and that is obviously on the beach because it's tropical. So I'm assuming the uniques are zoned out to the biomes that you have specifically, and if that is the case, since the biomes are determining maps, do these unique maps also have drops associated with them? Essentially where I'm going with this is, are certain biomes going to help you target farm certain types of items?
Absolutely, and we want to do even more than just what you were saying with the unique maps. Like we have just certain map. Like this map has got this theme, and therefore it can drop more of this item and stuff like that. Like we absolutely. And the thing is, this is one of the great things about the new way that the Atlas works, is that with the previous Atlas, we couldn't really allow for target farming in that same way. Or when we did, it was always a problem, like with div cards and so on, where, I mean, obviously we modified div cards so you can move them around now, but generally speaking, it was the case with the old Atlas that if we made it so a map had something special, then everyone would just play that map continuously forever. So with the new system, we effectively can say that, it's okay to have wild variance in between, the value of certain things, because, you're limited by having to find more of it. And if you happen to know that the thing that you want spawns in desert biomes, and then you're using towers to find those desert biomes, and then you're looking around, okay, like finally, I'm just going to go through all the deserts. You can absolutely do that. In the case of Untainted Paradise, that one requires being on the border of the water and a forest. So only forests next to ocean, I believe, will cause that map to spawn. And then like we can do other things like that as well. Like we can have special spawn conditions about like, when you get this and this, that's when this can spawn. And so that's like a way that we can kind of like fiddle around with the rarity. But also if players learn these things, then they can know what to look for when they're exploring the map, as far as like finding that stuff as well. So that can be a bit fun.
So I'm assuming that's going to influence things like racing, etc. But another question I had then is, does that mean that the people's individual map, because you said it's infinite, it's generated, etc. So does that mean each person has a completely random, different starting point? Like for instance, maybe I'm more prone to find Tainted Paradise, sooner than a different person.
I mean, it is certainly true that you can roll well on certain things. Like, there's nothing limiting the fact that you could find 5 Untainted Paradises near where you started and another person couldn't, right? But I think the law of averages will just mean that in general, it kind of ends up averaging out to the same kind of thing.
Sure.
I like. It is an interesting point that you make about racing, because it does mean that if you're looking about the race to 100, it is possible for one person to get luckier than the other as far as what maps spawn for them. But then by the same token, it's possible for someone to get lucky on what items drop for them or some other one of a million things. So the longer you play effectively, the more the law of averages happens and the more kind of it just comes down to play skill rather than randomness. Ultimately, everyone gets a different experience there. And when you reset your, when you do the thing where you run out of, where you no longer have any nodes to explore, by the way, that does change the seed of your atlas, so you'll get a new random layout as well. So that's just worth mentioning.
That's good. That's good to know.
So you can actually re-roll the complete layout if you want.
By dying 4 times.
Well, yeah, but I think there might even be a way to do it without dying. I'm not 100% sure on that. I can't remember what the way to trigger this was, but yeah, that is a thing.
Okay. The Atlas rolling meta coming up soon.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? Because we made sure we did think of the one thing of like, you're not going to get an Untainted Paradise within the initial fog of war that you can see when you first enter the Atlas. So like we don't allow that special stuff to spawn right in that first circle.
So I do have one follow-up here before I send it over to GHAZZY, really, because I'm just kind of thinking based upon this concept. So if there's certain biomes that are going to spawn certain types of unique maps, and maybe certain biomes are more prone to certain type of item drops, etc. But the maps themselves, I can't like take that Untainted Paradise, put it as a consumable, and then trade it on the market. Does this mean you're expecting much more social play, where it's like, hey, I found this unique map, who is expecting this unique map, and having people actually looking for other players that their particular, Atlas has the maps that people are particularly looking for? Is this something you guys are expecting and planning around? Or?
I think it could definitely happen for sure. As for whether that's good or not, I guess we'll find out. Like, it's really sort of hard to know what the sort of social dynamics of something like that will be.
Sure.
But yeah, absolutely, it's something that I have no doubt will start to occur. And the concern with this stuff is always, do you start to get, and sorry, the name of the server of the thing is of the Discord server that's incredibly infamous is slipping my mind right now. But there's an infamous Discord server where people do trading for things like that, and so there is a concern that it's like, oh, I'm effectively trading access to something like that for out of game, which is always a concern. But I guess we sort of decided that we were sort of hoping that it doesn't end up going that way. And we were so excited to sort of change the atlas over to this method that this is just something that we decided. You know what? I think we're willing to take the risk on that one. But I mean, it's sort of an interesting one. Like, if that becomes a problem, we might have to find a way around to solve it. I guess we'll sort of just have to see. I mean, look, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Fair enough answer. I'll send it over to GHAZZY. I think he had a question.
Yeah, we'll throw in one and rewind back in time a little bit to an interview you did with a D4 streamer, Vudio. And in there was a question regarding competitive game modes and races and whatnot, community events. With Cicerin has the Gauntlet event that's been very prominent with. And the question was about that being in PoE2, and you answered yes. Now, what we want to do is have you spill more of the beans here and give us some more details. Can you give us anything? Are there any plans in the works, et cetera, et cetera?
So at the start of early access, we won't be able to do any of that stuff. We just haven't had time. But look, it's definitely the kind of stuff that I like to do. Like, I really like those sort of PvE, but yet competitive type of events. Like, they're just really fun to me. I have no doubt that we'll be doing some of that stuff. It's just that, yeah, like for early access, we just haven't had time. The custom league system will come back in PoE2 as well, so you'll be able to do that stuff, and that sort of helps people organize their own races and things like that, which we'll have there. It won't be, once again, not day one of EA, but pretty soon after that, we'll get that in. And like, by the way, the thing that's blocking that is literally just like some of our web developers need to port the interface for that over to the Path of Exile 2 website, right? It just hasn't been done yet. So we just, as soon as they've got that in order, then that'll be available. So yeah, like we're absolutely doing. What was that? Sorry.
I think a lot of people really like the old school races that we used to have many years ago, like the descent races.
I love that. I love that stuff too. It was so cool.
12-minute races, like everyone can participate in that. Because like the race to 100, we talk about that a lot, right? But that's that's a lot of dedication and time invested. But these shorter races, an hour, half an hour, endless delve, like I think a lot of people would really like to see them come back again.
I would as well. The funny thing about that is that as cool as it was, and as like much as the community liked them, for whatever reason, it just didn't really result in people it just didn't really result in like actually more people playing, and that was kind of the reason why we found it really sucks because it's like, well, this is one of those cases where it's just a mercenary decision of like this. While everyone loves it, it just doesn't result in more players. So that's like if we're talking about spending time doing all that stuff versus adding more content to a league launch, that definitely adds more players. Unfortunately, it just had to go to the leagues. But the thing is that it was just really cool, and so like if I had some spare designers up my sleeve, then I would 100% get them working on this because it's something that is just super awesome. And I definitely think we should try it again as well for PoE2. Like, times have moved on a long time since back when we were doing that stuff. So I think it's worth another try and see like, does that stuff actually heat up into an actual into a scene of racing and so on that actually like causes there to be like just interest in itself coming to the game. So yeah, like look, I have no doubt we'll try some races, just not immediately.
And before I send it over to DM again, yes or no, are you in favor of having a battle royale PoE2 event?
Well, I mean, it would certainly be cool. Let me think about this. I'm just thinking. Is
it more skill-based gameplay?
Yeah. So I'm actually just thinking about this because I'm just thinking as you're saying this. Like, okay, so how would the new system translate to a battle royale format? Because one of the things that was interesting, I think, about the PoE1 version was the randomness of what skills you found. But in PoE2, of course, you've got the uncuts. I mean, that probably is fine, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Like, it wouldn't really be hard to do to just try it. The thing with something like a mode like that is it's really easy to just like try some random stuff, but to really make it actually good would require quite a lot more work. And at one point we were actually pretty keen to make like an actually good version of the battle royale thing, because when we announced that originally, like when I said 1 day of development, it really was just like there was a limit of like 1 day per developer of how much time they were allowed to spend on that, because it was like literally an April Fool's joke. And it turned out like it's kind of like one of those things that's like fun for for a few days, but it didn't really have like long lasting good gameplay because like no one had I mean, we didn't really test it, right? We just kind of just like did some random shit and put it up there, and it was kind of cool. So that was a fun little experience. But we did discuss like should we make an actual proper version of this? Like would this be something that actually works well? And we were kind of almost did, but I don't know, just like other stuff happened. We didn't end up doing it, but you know what? Maybe we should have another just like random fun battle royale and PoE 2 event. Just even if we don't like, just another one of those just like ultra kind of garage style. Just like everyone just like make some random stuff and just put it in there and we'll just see what happens. It could be fun.
I think so.
I used to do way more, like way back in the early days of PoE1. I used to do just like way more rando stuff like that. And I really enjoyed doing it, but for various reasons, like it's kind of like I don't know, like it's just never really like man. I find this stuff fun. So, a random example of this is I was like, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm gonna have a level 1 DPS competition. So we had a competition for like what is the character that can get the highest DPS at level 1, and then what we decided, I think we gave away, like, we're like, okay, if whoever wins this, we're just going to give like a t-shirt or something. There was just some random like prize that we were just going to give away. I was like, man, this is really smart because like if you use other characters to like rush your level 1 character, but then make sure they never get any leech any experience, then you can like get all the quests and like get all of the like passive points that you can get when you're level 1, and there's like quite a lot you can do. And it's like then it's like, okay, what's the minimum amount of experience you can possibly get by killing the mandatory bosses, in order to get the quest flags? Like, it was like all these like little things. I was like, man, people are gonna have so much fun with this stuff. And then we got all these like kind of negative reactions about it, of like people being like, oh, you have to cheat, you have to multi-box to do this competition. Like there was like, are you saying you're endorsing doing this? And there's like all this random stuff that the community kind of reacted negatively about with this. Because I guess they were kind of feeling like, like some guy who's like willing to spend all this time and like find the best level 1 item is going to be the one who wins it. And it's like, well, yeah, that was kind of the point, right? Like I was hoping that a bunch of people would, like some random like total basement dwelling people would be like, I'm going to spend like frickin' a week on this and like find like what the best possible way with like all these steps is going to be, and then that person will get a prize, right? Like it's just a completely out there thing. That is what happened. But for some reason people got angry about it, and I was kind of like, I guess I just don't understand. Like to me, that's cool. It's like it's not like this is some big feature that we worked on, right? It was just a random idea I had. So like I really love doing that kind of stuff, and I feel like like it would be cool to do more of that, but it kind of requires, I guess, a certain mindset in the community. So I don't know. Like there's always this worry whenever you do something like that of like, why are you wasting time on this when you could be doing some other thing, right? Yeah, that could be a concern.
I missed all these. I'm just sitting here thinking back because I think the reason this came up in conversations on a previous podcast we did with Pox. Pox was going through all of the different battle royales and PvP modes and all these fun events, and I realized there's all these fun events that I missed out on being a newer head to PoE. So kind of hope at some point those do come back.
I mean, you would have never experienced. You never would have experienced. You never would have experienced Descent, which was another one of those kind of like, kind of relatively quick to make things that we did, where we just kind of remixed a bunch of content and put it in a random order with like special chests and everything. And it was kind of a race event for a race that wasn't the game. And it honestly didn't take that long to make. It was pretty cool. It was fun. It was fun making all that stuff. It was really fun.
All right, well, +1 for...
It was incredibly enjoyable. Well, what you missed, DM, the best one was like, I remember you guys put the BR into a Twitch Rivals, and it was... It was massive. It was hilarious.
Well, +1 for minigames coming in the future. Something that I didn't... Maybe I'm just dumb, but I didn't see it in any of my early play tests. I didn't see it in any of the interviews or any of the footage you guys showed. Gym quality is obviously a thing. We have like Gym Lean Legionnaire, for instance, showing you a +12. The quality, obviously, it's scale, not support, was a difference made. But how do you actually do that? From my I didn't see any gym colors anywhere, so I'm curious to know what's going on with gym quality and the impact that you're hoping gym quality will have in the game.
Yeah, so effectively what we've done is we made gem quality a late game thing, because so it's kind of an end game that you get it. It's not restricted to any one system or anything like that, but it's just something that starts dropping in end game only. And effectively, they just increase like various things. Now, gem quality was one of those things that I think was a bit overcomplicated, or like there was things where like we want to try and do a little bit better when it comes to like what stats we're choosing to scale, to make that a little bit more fun. I don't have a full list of what they are or anything like that yet. Mark, this is actually something that's like coming in really late. Like I know gem quality is a thing we're doing. Like the balance of that has only been done in like the last few weeks. It is a thing. It's like it's nice to have another kind of grind that's like just to perfect the gem. And there's even a few other things like that of like perfecting your gems. There's one other one, but I don't know whether it got in or not. So maybe I shouldn't mention it. Relating to that. So
No, you can mention it. Surely.
A little bit later.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Okay. It's like you need to have like quite a few different systems at the end where it's like, okay, you can just eke out another 20%. You can eke out another 20% with this. You can eke out another 20% of that, right? And so you kind of want to have a lot of those things. So there's the role of fusing orbs, which that was the thing. I don't know whether it's in or not, so I'll just leave that as a cliffhanger there. There's things like you've got gem quality. You've got which I think is the 20%, and then of course the Gemling Legionnaire can go above that. Now, generally speaking, it has to improve the skill by 20% in some axis, but we're not going to. It's not just going to be just damage. Like it's going to be something, ideally a stat that, like, I mean, it may be in some cases, but ideally it's always something that's kind of a bit more interesting than that. So that's the hope anyway. And because of the fact that it's not just damage, that means that we can have it be something that's sort of end game only. And it's going to be harder to get than most other things because regular quality items you can get by salvaging. From other items that drop with quality, but I believe that gems don't drop with quality, so every single point of that is going to be hard earned using a GCP, a Gem Cutter's Prism. That'll kind of be one of those just final grinds at the end game of like getting all of those, getting enough of those, I think that should be just one of those extra things.
That answers that. So speaking of skill gems, there was one other skill gem that we saw teased one time and then wasn't talked about again, which was mounts in particular. Also is going to the Ranger, right? We saw the Ranger, but two questions here, which is, are there more than just the Roa mount, and are mounts more than just Ranger? Can I be expected to be a Titan double fisting two-handed maces swinging off the back of a Roa?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
So the Rangers are the Roa, I should say, is a Ranger. Well, no, I mean it's not Ranger only, but the bonus that it gives is the ability to fire while without slowing down. Only bow. Well, only like arrow skills are ones you can actually fire off the back of a Roa. So anyone else could ride it, but it's not going to give you any advantage to do so because it's just like the main thing you're getting is the ability not to slow down with arrows. It's not like some larger system really. It's just like a thing we made for that, and we just thought it was cool. And because the thing is, we don't want mounts to be like faster. So the reason why it's faster for the Ranger is because she gets to not slow. She just effectively gets to not pay the penalty of slowing down while shooting. But we don't want mounts to just be faster than running in any case, because if we do that, then it's like the whole different gameplay consequence and like that we don't want to have to deal with. So effectively, that sort of limits the number of things we can do with a mount like that. Now, I think it'll be cool later to do more mounts for more things. Like I'm sure there's ideas that you could have that would be cool. But for at least for the time being, that's the mount that we've got, and we won't be.
I am hearing, for the sake of roleplay cosmetic Andy, I do get to at least sit on the mount and walk around in town or something like
if you
that.
Want.
Okay.
Sure. And we could probably make some cosmetic mounts as well that were the same in that same vein, I suppose. Nothing stopping us doing that. So that might be fun.
I mean, on that topic, I'll pitch you this idea. Obviously, I want some royalties. So I like my skeletons to, when I mount up, to fall apart and the bones of the skeletons to form a skeletal horse. And when I dismount, I wanted to form the skeletons again. Okay?
Noted.
Thank you.
You will get exactly one cell. It will be GHAZZY behind the mount.
That would be so cool. Moving on to assembling things question. It's crafting related.
Yeah.
So I don't want to spend too much time on this. The crafting is very different, but it's what we're going to see a lot when we play. But I will ask a couple questions about it. So let's start with essences. Now, we are confirmed to be able to use essences multiple times where they guarantee a modifier. What we've seen is making a normal item into a magical item, guaranteeing one modifier. We've seen essences making a magic item, a regaling essentially, to turn into rare with a guaranteed second modifier if we want to. So I guess the first question is regarding essences. Is this a guaranteed specific modifier, or is it a 1x speed modifier or 1x attack modifier?
Yeah, so it is listed as it's one of a group, but in many cases, that for a given item type, there's only one mod of that type that could spawn anyway. So effectively, like in those cases, it's completely guaranteed. But there's a few cases where it could be one of a couple of mods. But generally speaking, for a given item type, it will just be one mod. And the main reason why we did it that way, even though mostly it's just a single mod anyway, is because we didn't want to have the thing where you've got the giant list where for each item type it's like, here's what mod you're going to get, and like it's kind of annoying. So we just wanted to say like it'll give you a mod of a certain group, and then that way you can sort of know what you're going to get from that. Yeah, effectively, generally speaking, though, you're going to know what you're going to get from that mod, except for like a couple of specific cases, I think.
Okay. On the follow-up there, we talked about that earlier with the wiki in-game to search for monsters. Talked about that a little bit earlier. I guess another question in similar fashion be for crafting. Is there any idea or desire or even plans to give us the tool to look at the tooltip in-game of seeing these are the modifiers that can be applied to this item to avoid, again, having to go to third-party sites and tools?
So we actually were going to have, so I'll give you some... Okay, so at the event that you even went to, DM, there was probably, you might have noticed the crafting bench that we still had in that version. And that actually got cut. And so what that was going to be was not only was it a crafting bench, but also it effectively served as your as your encyclopedia of mods. Because you could see when you put an item in there exactly what mods could actually go on it, because the user interface not only sort of had the crafting thing, but it also had kind of like the like here's the mods that can spawn, and like sure, some of them are grayed out because you can't you can't craft them on this item, but you could at least see what they all were. So we actually kind of were working towards something like that, but the problem was that the crafting bench had all sorts of issues, which I mean I could go into if you want, but like but suffice to say the feature got cut, and so now we currently don't have something like that. And that's a bit of a shame, because I do think that being able to see that stuff in game is good, and like we were actually doing something useful with that. So it's possible that we might bring something like that back a little bit later. Like we did a bunch of UI work to kind of get this to be the case. And I do think that it's good to have that stuff in game. It's just that we don't currently have that for mods. That's a bit of a shame.
Not to dive into...
I mean, that sounds...
you want to go ahead?
Sorry.
I was going to say, not to dive into the reasons for the cut of the crafting bench as much as to, do you still expect it to come, or is it a decision like we shouldn't have this in the game as much as like it's not ready technically, there's bugs or something, it's like a to be determined, or is it like nah, firm decision?
It was a design problem, not a technical problem. So I might as well just go into it, right? Might as well just go through the whole thing. So effectively, we had this whole... So during betas, actually, we had a lot of feedback all the time about people saying, I don't have a way... You're not giving me the tools to fix the problems that I have with my build, right? And the type of player that we were getting that from a lot was PoE1 players, right? Because they're used to the crafting bench. And the crafting bench absolutely is a way to be able to fix problems with your build. So the first way that we I'm trying to think back. So the problems that we had with the crafting bench is it kind of trivialized certain mods, and the issue the designers often have is like, okay, effectively what it does is, because the mods you can get from the crafting bench are kind of like, they're not top tier, but they are kind of good enough, I guess. So it meant that effectively a rare item was only it was only 5 mods plus a crafted mod, and that sort of reduces the amount of power you can get at the top end on some level, or like the level or the degree to which randomness can cause an item to be good relative to the average item. Which some people would say is a good thing, right? And some people would say is a bad thing. But the point is, there was always this contention around this, right, with the designers and so on. So that was like sort of one of the issues. And so then the other issue was just the way the costing was. I think it was just like, I can't remember exactly what we were unhappy about with that, but effectively we were unhappy about that. So we came up with another design. And the first design of it was, what we're going to do is we're going to say that whenever you get an item, you can salvage a mod off an item that will destroy the item, and then you'll get some kind of juice of that mod, or like maybe some kind of essence or something like that. Like, effectively you'd get some kind of amount of like something for that mod, and then you would build up to the point where you can then put that mod on another piece of gear. So we tried this out, and the problem that we were having is that if we tried like 5 different ways that this could work in terms of like how it could work, and generally speaking, there was always this fight every single time of like, if we make this like easy enough so that players can easily do it, then the designers start to get unhappy about the fact that items are becoming too trivial, like we're not happy about this, like all these sort of issues like that. And if we make it so that the players, so that the designers are happy, then the players are like, this is just busy work and it takes me forever and I have to salvage all these items, you're making me make decisions, and there was like all sorts of things that the like players were just not very happy about. Like, it just didn't feel fun to actually use. Like I actually was never really happy with it in terms of just the user experience of using it. So we had built this whole thing, and we balanced it a whole bunch of different ways, and then I think we were a bit too close to the issue, because the other thing that was happening through all of this was like, like Mark often was like, oh, what if we just didn't have the crafting mesh? Like, can we just not have it? Like, the item system does work. Like, there's all these complaints, but but maybe we just don't need it. And I know that Rishi as well was kind of like, yeah, I prefer. He was like, I prefer not to have it, but then like if it works this way, then I am okay with having it. And it's like, no one was happy. You know what I mean? Like and this is not a good thing. When you've got a system like that. So eventually, I think as I said, I was a little bit too close to the issue, because I was like, we can't launch into early access without a crafting bench, because the crafting bench is just a thing that PoE players expect. And like, if we don't have a way for players to feel like they've got a way to solve problems like resist or something like that, then people are going to crucify us, right? Like, it's a really big issue. And eventually, and I don't remember who I think it was Rishi even who might have suggested this. He basically just said, hey, because that's right. Because at one point I was like, what if the crafting bench just added an extra mod, so it didn't affect the existing mods? You could just add an extra mod, even if you've already got the mod on the item. If it just adds an extra mod, then it would solve the problems, because it doesn't like interfere with the randomness of the other mods, but it also lets you solve your problems. So like, there shouldn't be any issue, like sort of thing. And that we're kind of like, yeah, that'll solve the problem. But we still had the problem where people weren't really enjoying actually destroying and salvaging mods of items. Like, adding the extra, like, here's another thing to think about in the item system was just something that people just wasn't fun. So then Rishi said, okay, well, you're talking about adding an extra mod to all items. Well, we already have the socket system that we created for Ultimatum, for the Val Orbs. Because at the time, what that did is it could add one socket, but you didn't have existing sockets on items. So it's like, what if we just allow sockets to spawn on items? We have a currency that lets you add sockets, and we just also have just common runes that have just like the standard mods. And this took basically no effort to implement, because we already had the stuff for sockets. We already had like basically everything we needed, and it pretty much exactly was filling the function that the crafting bench was supposed to fill. But yet it didn't have. But yet it feels fun, because you don't have to have this busy work of having to salvage mods, like salvage mods all the time. So effectively, it was just a way better solution. And as soon as we tried that, it's like, designers are happy, players are happy, everyone's happy. So it was just immediately just way better. So yeah, but it does mean that we just don't get that nice encyclopedia of mods that we had before. So I mean, that still exists, right? Like, we could put that in a moment's notice. We have the system. But what I'm thinking is maybe we can find a way to get something of that nature in later on without it requiring as much busy work. So one thing we discussed was like, well, what if we had this as an endgame thing? Because like, at endgame, you wouldn't have as much of that tension problem of like, because in order to make the balance work for the amount of juice you need for a mod to work both at early game and at late game, the kind of balance you need to do is like kind of annoying with like massive exponential scaling factors and like stuff like that. That was one thing's like, maybe it would work if it was an endgame only system. So I guess that's a bit of a ramble, but effectively all that is to say, we've got this sitting in the wings. We could theoretically bring it back. The problem is a design issue, not a technical issue. It's just like we're never happy with how it played. And so, yeah, maybe one day we can make a way for it to work.
I appreciate you going into the detail on it, because it's actually like, it's really cool to hear the thought process behind it instead of just hearing it's not going to be in the game, like actually hearing the process of how you came to it. I appreciate the answer. Go on, GHAZZY, you're going to say something?
Sorry. I do think about like the whole idea with the crafting bench. So we're not going to have a crafting bench. It's being replaced by sockets. Featured. I think it's pretty fair the way that approach is. It seems to solve the situation. But we also have the idea of microtransactions, of bench micros that needs to be supported in PoE too.
So I think that for now, at least, I believe that the salvage bench, obviously it's like way less of a big deal, but the salvage bench, you can still have that in your hider. You can still retheme that how you like. And then if we do add the crafting bench back, then you'll just be able to reskin that as well. There are also a couple of other things that are basically benches. So effectively, you'll be able to reskin those using crafting benches that you've already bought. So long as they're in the game, then you have that. So effectively, that's what you get for now. I do understand that it's like a little bit weird, because the bench is not like the salvage bench is not as big of a deal as what the crafting bench was in PoE 1. So like you could argue that the reskin has less value in that sense, but it's still a thing you can put in your hideout and still use in that way. So we still have the compatibility there.
I think of it this way, like it might be a far-fetched idea, but like think of the crafting bench if you put in your item in that you want to craft on, and then implement a feature like Rogpog crafting. So you have a menu, say, hey, I want to use a Chaos Orb. You click on that one, it will tell you this is what's going to happen to the item. Then you have to click craft. Now if we have a proper use of the crafting bench, it features from PoE1 to PoE2. I think people would like that with the idea of like showing the modifier that can apply to the item.
Right.
It's like one of the things PoE2 so far is doing really good job at is preventing us from utilizing third-party tools and sites to the extent that it is, and that could be a step in that direction. Again, just spitballing here.
Sure.
But I want to move on to another part of this question because otherwise we're going to sit here for another couple of hours. And it is about metacrafting. We saw the omens allowing you to have the metacrafting approaches. So this question is from Empyrean, so shout out to him for this, by the way. The question is, can we use multiple metacrafts at once, so multiple omens at once for a craft?
Right. I believe that you can't, but I could be wrong about that. But my understanding is it's one omen at a time. Yeah, that does. I think they would probably get too powerful if you're able to use more than one at once. I guess you haven't seen the whole list yet, but effectively, yeah, one at a time is the main idea with that.
So the next,
throw the ball over to you, DM.
Yeah, we're going to move over here to ascendancies and trials related question real quick. So we saw the ascendancy. We know how you do it. You do it through the trials. One of the things that we were trying to get some clarity on is, do you get points from the trials based upon how far you progress in the trials, or is it the type of situation where you're going to do multiple different trials to get the points? I know there's like the coins associated with it, so I was hoping we could, hear how you go from your first two to your second two, et cetera, in terms of points.
So effectively, as you get higher level coins, for example, if coins in the case of Sanctum, so as you get higher level coins, there's like certain level breakpoints where new floors open up. So each floor, in the case of Sanctum, there are 4 floors, and then those effectively, if you complete floor 1, you get 2 points. If you complete floor 2, you get your second 2, etc. But the extra floor only becomes available once you get a coin of a high enough level, and it says on the coin like how many floors you're allowed to do based on that coin. So that means that you can't ascend a second time as soon as you get there. Like you do have to get to a coin from a slightly higher level. And the same is basically true of ultimatum as well. So effectively, it'll say on the ultimatum how many rooms you're able to do, and thus and basically for that one, it's the number of bosses that you've killed. So after you've killed the first boss, you get 2 points. After you killed the second boss, you get 2, and then the third boss, you get another 2, and then the final challenge at the end, the 4th boss that have you that content. If you're able to kill that one, then you get your 4th set of points for that. So effectively, in both cases, there are 4 bosses that you can kill, and effectively, once you've defeated, the second set of them, then you get more points and so on and so forth.
Now, I think you alluded to this earlier, but just to further clarify, Atlas progression can be done in a group as well as ascendancies. Can you do those in a group? So when you go to do the ultimatum, etc., you can.
Yeah. So everyone will be able to ascend. Everyone will be able to ascend if you go in a party. For the Atlas, the Atlas state is only one. Like it's one person's state, but obviously everyone's getting rewards and so on from that. But but in terms of actually exploration, only one person is getting that exploration because they've all got separate atlases. So effectively, it has to be that way.
I'm assuming the Atlas modifiers go off the person who opens the point, whose party it is.
Yeah. So effectively, that person. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. GHAZZY, you want to go?
Yeah, we'll move over to the next one. We're going to go a little faster so we don't waste your time either or occupy too much.
We're getting towards the end here. Just a couple more.
Yeah. So we saw a lot of skills being involved for specific weapons in the reveal. We saw them open up an uncut skill gems. It was swords, maces, and flail. So the questions first is, are there more new types or different types of weapons to come? And can we hear a bit about those? We'll start with that.
Yeah, so effectively all of the, on that list, it does have the full list of all the weapon types. Now, I should mention that the weapon types for classes that are sort of designed for classes that we're not releasing yet, we're not giving the skills for those out either at the moment. And that's just because, effectively the weapon set of skills there is the class, and then if we're doing that, we'd also have to do all that other work as well. So effectively, there would be no point if we did that. And that does actually mean, by the way, that swords are not dropping in PoE 2 right now because there's no sword skills for them, so there's no point in having them do that. So effectively, yeah, like the ones that we've announced, like those set of ones that's what you're getting at the moment. And yeah, as throughout early access, we'll add some more. But effectively, that we do have that list on the side, so you can see what they'll all be. And we'll talk more about like the specific play style of each of those weapons as we get through it. But I will say one thing is that the skills that you get on each weapon type, I do want to make sure that if each weapon type feels very different from one another. Like I would say that in PoE 1, that like the difference between an axe and a sword is like not really that important, and I kind of want to make sure that like it feels like the skill set you get for each one is more distinct, and and thus the playstyle is different. So yeah, you'll obviously see more about that as we add the more classes.
Fair enough. But you said that there were all of them there, and in the playtest that I've been part of, we've seen both wands, scepters, and staves, but there were no skills related to those three. Is that something we're going to see in the future?
So the wands are kind of like a part of the occult line, and each wand has its own skill on it. So there's actually a bunch of skills on those wands, and yeah, as you play through the game, effectively those will be part of your set of skills as well. And then scepters have so there's actually two lines of scepters. There's the ones that are more minion focused, and those either give you minions or things that support minions. And then there's the ones that are kind of designed to be more, more for a different class. So there's another class as well that uses scepters commonly. I actually don't know whether or not any of those scepters are in the game currently, but effectively there's like kind of a line of scepters that are designed. They give you spirit, but they're not so much about minions. They're about something else.
Templar
So
question
you've got that
mark?
yeah. It's pretty obvious, I suspect.
Yeah.
But pretty obvious. But effectively, so you've got that as well. So and then you've got the staves, which also have their own set of things as well. So effectively, there's actually quite a lot of skills that are represented there that you don't see in those lists because they're kind of separate. And actually, one thing I should mention that maybe wasn't obvious is that anytime something says it grants a skill, that skill is supportable with support gems. So like in the in the presentation, if you saw an ascendancy class and that ascendancy class node says grant skill and then some skill, you can support that skill with sockets on your character. So like that time stop, for example, like that's a supportable skill. You can put things on that, and stuff like that. So that's actually kind of one of those things that's not entirely obvious from just looking at it.
Fair enough. We'll move over to the next question, which is with life not on the passive tree. Shout out to Kriparian for this one. Are some characters still going to potentially be significantly tankier than others as they are in PoE 1?
Yeah.
Just to give some more context for the people watching, we're talking about the difference between, say, a CI versus Mind Over Matter versus life stack and armor evasion, etc.
Yeah. So I mean, you can still absolutely get life, from gear, but the main way that the tree is going to allow you to get to get tankier is effectively other effects like to do with defenses, right? So armor evasion and so on. And there's quite a lot of stats around modifying those and doing different things with those. I think there is a lot of scope for that kind of thing, and I think it's more obvious to a new player that if you want to be defensive, then go for all this armor or evasion or whatever nodes. Like the whole breakdown of like some X% needs to be life or whatever, I think was confusing before. So effectively now, if you want defensive to be more defensive, allocate those defensive nodes, and you should be doing fine. We do want to make sure that you can feel a lot more defensive than some other characters for sure. I mean, I guess there's not a huge amount more to say about that. Effectively, yes, we want to have the ability to control a lot of defensiveness from the tree.
I'm going to rapid fire a few questions related to warrior ascendancies here. So one of them that got shown during the LA presentation that went on actually an Open World Games video and then has been kind of spread around Reddit, etc., is effectively the rucksack is back. So you have the Titan, it says plus 20 inventory space. There's been some questions related to quality of life being something that you get as an ascendancy point related to only a particular ascendancy. So could you elaborate on the decision behind this?
I guess there's not really a huge amount to say about it. Like Mark was the one who was like, yeah, we should probably do this, and like he'd probably be a better one to answer that question. But he was kind of like, you know what, I think we'll try it out, right? If it doesn't work, we'll just change it. Just true of anything we do. So yeah, I don't think there's some big deep philosophy around this. It's just kind of like hey.
Sure. For context, I think the reason people are asking is like, well, I want plus 20 on my class. It's type of questions here. GHAZZY, did you want to?
I do want to, I'll interrupt you real quick. There's that as well, sure. But there's also this idea that your first two ascendancy points, where your ascendancy points, you get two of them, you kind of want to get the majority of the classes giving you something that gives you power.
Fair enough.
Whereas this choice is only giving you a quality of life feature, and Blood Mage, first two ascendancies, is a negative input for the class. So I was curious about the decision making.
Right. So, okay, well, I'll go into the Blood Mage one at least. So one thing I should mention about that is that it does allow you to overcap your life by double, which is something that I didn't mention in the video, but it's kind of important, right? So effectively, if you're picking up those orbs, then you can get to double the amount of life that you normally have. So yeah,
Okay.
Mark actually pointed out.
Massive deal.
Yeah, Mark actually mentioned that I forgot to mention that upside in the in the thing. So yeah, that's kind of an important element as well.
Okay, all right.
So, yeah.
That's actually kind of
But
fun.
yeah, but I kind of look. I know what you mean about the about the one with the inventory space keystone. Sorry, ascendancy node. So yeah, I understood, right? Like I totally get where you're coming from with that.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next ascendancy node. So during the footage, speaking of the footage of the presentation, I'm sitting there and I'm super hyped about Warrior. I'm going to play Warrior. I play Warrior in all 3 tests. I want maces, seeing the giant splits, all looking good, right? So then they show the Warrior class of the Ancestral Spirit. And the footage shows a monkey who gets summoned. He pounds his chest and he runs into a
away.
tree. He just runs away.
Yes, I know. And this came up during when we saw that so late as well. So okay, one thing I think you guys should understand is the fact that okay, you probably assume that this video was ready like a week ago. Well, let me tell you, we were rendering it out the night before. And still freaking working on it, right? So there are a lot of things about that video that I certainly would have wanted to improve. And the monkey running off into the tree was definitely on the list. Okay, like that was in there. That was certainly not lost on us. Unfortunately, we just didn't get time to fix that.
To be fair, I'm not
but yes, I know what you mean. It didn't look good.
Yeah, I'm not so much trying to roast you about the monkey. It's like everyone wants to know what the monkey do. Like there's a monkey, but what is it? What does the monkey do? Is there any chance I could find that out?
I mean, I don't actually have the finer details on this one. It's I actually don't know. I would have to ask Mark about that one. He's the one working on that.
Fair enough. So there's a monkey.
Yeah, I know. But the thing, but it was not lost on me though. That one thing, like it was. Yeah, honestly, like it's people. Yeah, it came in hot, that presentation. Let me just say that.
All right.
So it does more than runs away. Then.
Yes, it does more than runs away for sure. It's going to be attacking. It's going to be doing stuff. It's just, I think, just AI failed.
It does something at some point. Got it.
Yeah.
The Jade would be the next portion. We saw the Jade. Is that defensive only? There was a Jade ramping stack and lets you gain Jade per second. So the question is, are you gaining Jade as you're in Jade form sitting there, and then that translates to a buffs of some kind, or do you have to stack Jade in order to be able to use the skill? So I was hoping, would you be willing to give us any...
So while you're not using the skill, effectively it's building up, and that's effectively acting as a counter of the amount of damage that you can sustain. I should mention, by the way, that, and I didn't do a good job of explaining this in the video, that you can turn on and off, like, quickly. Like, you've got an amount of Jade, and it's like you use it as when the boss slams, and then you can let go. You don't just stay as a Jade statue. The video made it look like you just stay as a statue until it runs out, but that's not how it works. You just hold it down while in your Jade, then you let go, and you're not. That's the... Yeah. So, well, I mean, you just hold down the skill, right? So effectively, you can use that to tank a bunch of damage, and and I think the design intention here really is that without dodge rolling, you can stay where you are and tank like even an unblockable hit, and then follow up immediately without having to like dodge away and like get out of position. So that's kind of the idea of that.
Okay, excellent.
It's just like a toggleable Vol Arctic armor kind of thing, then.
Well, the thing is, I don't like the word toggleable to use here. It is a skill you are using because, like, while you're holding it, it's there, and then when you're not holding it, it's not there. And also, you can't do anything else while you're a Jade statue, right? It's like it's like a skill that is turning you into a statue that's unmoving until you let go, and then you can follow up again. So it's kind of like, as I said, you should think of it more like a dodge roll where you don't have to actually move. Like it's a way of defending yourself against a big attack that you would otherwise get away from.
Okay, well, that makes it sound a lot better.
Right.
So another question people are going, I'm going to try and make this a little bit faster here. Party play, there was the Chronomancer, looked awesome, was the one that caught me off guard the most. How does the freezing time work in party play? Can we get to a point?
It doesn't stop your friends.
Okay.
It only stops the monsters. So
so you can overlap these, like have someone go and then the next guy go and then the next guy go, and theoretically.
I don't see why not. That would work.
There you go. I'm gonna tell you what, I'm gonna cut in here with 2 more quick ones, and then we're gonna let GHAZZY add some minion questions. After that, we're just at the Q&A rapid fire, the last few couple from chat here, and then we're pretty much gonna send you on your way. So, div cards have been in the game. I believe this was confirmed from the puzzle boxes that were originally came out. Was the first basically mention of this. So we're hoping to hear a little bit of information about how you want div cards to be, presented within, this as well as maybe some timelines. Because I saw in the packs you guys are both selling this as well as unique items will come up as supporter packs as well. So some information related to all of those questions.
So effectively, once we've got the our ducks in a row to be able to sell that, because we were a little bit worried. We were just kind of feeling we were planning on selling at the same time as the supporter packs came out, but we ran out of time a little bit, so we couldn't quite put them up, and we were a bit worried because the way the system works with these limited sale items, you've got to make sure there's fairness issues around it. So we're kind of thinking we should probably make sure that we've got a time that we're going to sell, and we've got some system for allowing people to fair access to them, because we're not going to sell too many of them, because every single one of them requires that an artist draws an image, based on a description that the player supplies. So this is going to be a limited thing. There won't be too many of them sold. And then the same is true of the of the uniques as well. Now these are going to be expensive, right? Because the thing is that we can't sell that many of them, and the cost to deliver a unique item now is so much higher than it was back when it was just some art and a few stats. There's a lot going on with these, so we're going to be doing that. I understand that you got one randomly in a box. Is that right, DM?
I did. I was curious for myself. I wasn't going to take your time asking it, but since you're bringing it up, were the boxes sent out? Did you guys handpick? Did you get this one? Or you put them in a hat?
Yeah. So there was a 10% chance to get a creator unique, and a 90% chance to get a div card. So you lucked out. Pretty hard.
Oh my God! One time, no whammies. All right.
So hopefully people don't feel insulted if they didn't get one of those, because it really was random. I've got no idea who they got sent to. But anyway, what was it? Oh, that's right. So the div cards, yes. So the div cards designed, they've actually got a bit of a new design as well, a fresh coat of paint, but they do fundamentally work the same way that they worked before. The nice thing is that because of the way the Atlas works now, it's much more reasonable for us to make the drop rates, you're not going to be able to, since you won't be able to just grind a single map again and again and again, we can kind of make it them better in terms of how often they drop when you find a given map and things like that. And it's just nicer for us to be able to spread them around the Atlas like this. So I think that'll make the div card experience quite a lot cooler. I think hopefully it's just a fun time, right? We like doing this community stuff. It's just fun to have the players involved and things like that. So that'll be fun. And of course, the uniques are another whole can of worms. There's always a lot of back and forth with the community members about how OP it can be and all that sort of stuff like that. It's definitely always a thing. So it'll be interesting to see how well you could work with our designers on that one.
All right,
I'm still waiting for my box. It's stuck in customs.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. It's Sweden's postal service is horrible. No, it's terrible.
So at this point, pretty much, I think we cut GHAZZY loose to ask his minion-related questions. I think he had a little list of these here.
A little list. I try to keep it short. I hope everybody's comfortable. So let's just dive right into it. We label this as the GHAZZY minion rant. It is short, though, mind you. We can start with the footage we watched earlier from content creators had the demon form from the Infernalist. When you popped it, all the minions disappeared. In the footage, in the reveal, you had minions.
Yep.
We need some elaboration on this.
Yep. So this is actually something that I think probably does need some addressing, because right now, since the demon form is a shapeshift form, it means that your weapons are no longer equipped, which means you don't have your scepter. And I need to talk to Mark about the balance of that, because I think that's probably not correct. This is just one of those things that needs probably some specific stuff. So I'll talk to him about that, and we'll make sure that we sort something out. Because that demon form is obviously intended to be used with minions. It has it's got specific stuff. So I'll talk to him and we'll see about that. That was happening there for sure. But yeah, as I said, I think it needs to be addressed.
The next question is, I know you love this. A lot of people don't, but I know you love it, and it is the Animate Guardian. Will we see it? Will it work differently?
Not an EA, but we'll see. We'll see about that. No. Okay, there is something. No, you know what? It's not an EA, so I won't talk about it. But there are some other things that kind of take some of the design space of that you'll see later on. But there are some stuff. I just think that it didn't quite make it. I'm pretty sure it hasn't made it yet, so we won't have that.
Okay. So we obviously have the spirit being the reservations resource for both minions and auras. So could you elaborate on the power balance approach that you have, the mindset for minion players when it comes to reserving your spirit? Like, how are we supposed to incorporate auras, or is it just meant for us to just not have any auras? They're supposed to be for minions.
So a couple of things I'll say. One of them is that on some level, you do have to make some decisions about, like, do I want more aura? Do I want more minion? My hope is that there'll be some tension there, where, like, in some cases it'll be more of one, some cases it'll be more of the other. However, I will mention that you effectively have an aura on a stick with the scepter, because the scepters have a bunch of traditional aura mods. So effectively, that's what the expectation is usually, that if you're playing a pure minion build and you're not wanting to actually hit yourself, then you'll probably want to go all in with all of the sort of aura mods on the scepter, and that will allow you to kind of get that kind of gameplay there as well. So that would be the intention there. Yep.
Speaking of scepters, I know we talked about this in LA a few times actually, and that's regarding weapon swapping. When you have a scepter in one hand and now you're weapon swapping to a non-scepter set.
So the intention is to have it so that you can lock one of the weapons to work on both sets. So if you've got one scepter that is like really good, then you can effectively lock that in place so that no matter what you're swapping your other hand to, you can keep that, like you can make sure that you've still got your scepter. But I believe that feature isn't quite in yet, and I don't know if it'll make it for early access or not. It might do, or it might not, depending on whether we get time to do it.
I do want to
follow-up question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Follow-up question on that is, let's say you have a scepter, like that gives you X amount of more skeleton warriors.
Yeah.
And you're weapon swapping to without scepters. Now, obviously, the warriors goes away. But if the scepter gives you spirit that you have reserved for minions, in what order, what minions will be then disappear when you're then switching to a set that gives you less spirit than you were reserving?
Good question. Now what? Okay, so. Now the answer to this is tricky, because there is another user interface that isn't going to make it for early access that will much more clearly let you configure this, because that interface has a separate column for each weapon set you have, and you can put up and down the minion counts per weapon set in one grid. Because so that actually allows you to really exactly dial in this exact stuff. But unfortunately, we didn't get time. And so there are a couple of problems with regard to spirit and minions and that interface that we have right now that are make it a bit more confusing. And so we actually, we literally have prototypes of this, but we just didn't quite finish it for EA. But effectively, you can control what minions are going to be spawned on what weapon set independently, and you don't necessarily have to have. It's not necessarily the case that certain ones die because you ran out of spirit. It can be that you just have a completely different setup of how you want your minions to be on the other weapon set if you want. And then some will die and others will summon based on that. So you can use weapon sets to effectively have two completely different layouts of how you want your minions to be if you want. That is a possibility that you have, because effectively the reservations you have per weapon set are per weapon set and can be completely configured to whatever ones. Now, any counts that are if you've got a count on one that's 3 and a count on one that's 6, then yeah, it'll change the 3 will die in order to account for the other 3. But effectively, you can do kind of any kind of layout you want actually between the different sets. So the way that you'll see that is if you change weapon sets right now, then effectively the numbers will change in that thing. And if you adjust them, then it will effectively unlock the 2 between the 2 sets. And that's kind of the confusing part, I think, at the moment, because it's not obvious that that's occurring. And that's the reason why we wanted to have that grid layout of having here's weapon set A, here's weapon set B, here's the counts you have in each one. So to make that very explicit so you can see what's going on there. And it's the same with auras as well, where you can have auras enabled and disabled on certain weapon sets. But it's not very obvious with the user interface that we have at the moment that that's going on.
Okay. It seems like that seems like the solution, to have one set for single target fights and one for clearing.
Yeah, you can do things like that if you want. You can do things like that.
What were we saying, DM? Sorry.
So I got a question, just because you're talking about weapon swapping here. So dual wielding, and the thing that I thought looked interesting is dual wielding two-handers. Obviously, look pretty cool. So I'm kind of curious: is the benefit of dual wielding two-handers is it the same as PoE 1, or how exactly does the benefit of dual wielding two-handers scale in PoE 2?
Yeah, so effectively it's actually different per skill. So every skill has got its own decision about how dual wielding works with it. In some cases, that will be visual in the sense that you can just see the fact that you hit with both weapons, in the animation, right? So they're just... Now, what we're generally trying to do is make sure that each attack, just both weapons are inside it, and the animations might be such that, the idea is to try and sort of balance that with what the animation is effectively doing. But usually you'll hit with both weapons in a single attack, but there are some attacks where you alternate and then you are faster. And there are some attacks that hit with both at the same time, and it merges the damage packages so that you get like all of your stuff in one. Like it actually is just very skill dependent. You'll have to sort of play around a bit to do that. But
Awesome.
one thing you might have noticed is that on skill gems now, and this is also true in the skill in the advanced skill screen. There's different tabs where you can see the different, like it'll have like weapon A and weapon B and different tabs and things like that. I believe that's how it works anyway. So that means you can kind of see like how that all interacts. And but effectively, different answer per skill.
Okay, appreciate that.
I'm gonna move on with my minion rant and say I'm just gonna say one word and a question mark, and the word is golems.
Not right now, but I am sure we'll come to those in the future.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it up with a couple of quick ones from the minions. Shout out to Crip for this one, and that is the first question here is permanent minions have commonly had lower power scaling than that of temporary minions in PoE 1, and the question is, will this theme still be a thing in PoE 2 despite the lack of generating corpses versus bosses?
So effectively, the temporary minions are designed in such a way that they can make a boss fight make sense in terms of damage and everything that you can do. And the temporary minions are kind of designed in a way to make it so that when you've got your permanent ones plus also your temporary ones, then that makes sense for clearing. So this is kind of a way to have like a different situation for bosses versus non-bosses. Now there are certainly cases where you've got bosses that have minions, and then those ones you can raise temporary minions, and that effectively means that a minion build will have an easier time with those fights just because of that. Just because of that. But that's kind of okay. Like many fights don't have the boss is not spawning minions, so like it's kind of not like a big deal. And also it's just fine sometimes to just have some fights where some builds are better than others, and that's okay. So effectively, the intention is that with just the permanent minions that you have, you should be well, with a couple of exceptions. There's a few ways to do a few things, but effectively with just the permanent minions you have, that should make boss combat feel correct. And it's also kind of important as well because when you've got a full suite of temporary minions, the amount of minions you can have is like absolutely outrageous. And for clearing, that's fine, but for making boss combat actually makes sense. Having the fewer number by just having only the permanent ones kind of means that like you actually get the like proper combat we're trying to have for boss fights. So I think that actually does quite work in that way, having the combination of the two.
It's funny that you mentioned because that's how it felt playing at even low level. Like you had an army. It was beautiful. I will ask one last question, which is actually the most important one. We saw Blood Mage, we saw Infernalist, which seems to be like the fire-oriented minion ascendancy. But where's my Necromancer? Like, is the third ascendancy going to be like Occult Chaos, Dot, Curse, and minions? Or what are we expecting to see here?
I won't say exactly what it is, but what I will say is this. One challenge we have with the ascendancies is we don't want it to be that if you're playing a minion character, here's the one ascendancy, right? Like, we don't want it to be that this is always your choice. So this makes it very tricky to design because we need to make sure that there's like something and a variety of these that you'd actually be interested in. And so that being said, look, I think it's a cool fantasy that we want to have the sort of Necromancer type thing, but I think that in order to do it, we have to make it so it's not just so obviously what you need to pick that's the only choice. And effectively, so this is the design problem we have. So I think that effectively there was a shelving of like we're having trouble solving this problem. We'll just go with these two for now, and that's kind of like the main issue. So that's effectively the design constraint we're working around with this.
Okay.
So now we made it through all our main questions. We have a handful of just like, you don't have to elaborate much, just real simple ones that we put from the chat right before the start. And then, thank you. We went about a half hour longer than we were planning to hold you, but we appreciate you taking the time. So I'll shoot these last ones out from the chat here. Okay, first one, strong boxes. That were shown in the review seem like you kind of get locked in almost like Richie one. It takes a really long time for them to come out. So
this is another one of those I wish we could have replaced that shot things, because like afterwards we're like, god damn it, like we sped up the frickin' spawn rate on that strong box like right before we recorded that, right after we recorded that, and we didn't get a chance to reshoot it. So yes, the number of monsters that spawned from that is much faster normally. It's just that the number was incorrect in that video. So you should expect the strong boxes just to be better than that. I believe that the smoke thing, I think the smoke thing was just a mod on it, wasn't it?
It could have been. I might have missed
I think
that,
it was.
yeah.
No, but the minion pace, it was like every time I saw that when I was watching like people react and stuff, I was like, god damn it. I really wish we had a chance to reshoot that shot.
Like the monkey, yeah.
Yeah, like the monkey. Exactly.
All right, so next one here. Mouse plus analog concurrently? Like if you have an analog stick plus a mouse, can you use them both at the same time? This was somebody asking about an accessibility question.
So we plan to have it so that you can swap, like, so the UI will swap dynamically between the console version and the keyboard version, like when you just use each controller. But right now it doesn't do that. But that's a feature that's been really requested, so we're gonna get to it. We just need to get to it after the start of EA. But maybe you weren't asking that exactly. Were you asking about analog controller?
I think they're asking, like I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you, really the accessibility. But the question particularly says they want to use the mouse and an analog stick at the same time, and I'm not sure how that would work.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar.
That is not something that we currently support. As I said, the thing we will support is just the ability to swap from mouse keyboard UI to controller UI. And the main reason for that, by the way, is because people are keen to be able to manage their inventory using mouse keyboard, but actually play using controller. And so that's something that we're keen to support once we once we get around to doing that, which shouldn't be too far into early access.
On that topic, we had another rapid fire question. That is mouse and keyboard support for consoles. Yes or no?
Not currently there, I believe. It's something that we hadn't really considered until someone asked it very recently. I suppose it could be done. I would have to check in with the console team, but yeah, I don't believe it's there currently.
All right. Another really big question, which we're going to condense to a rapid fire version, and that is, we saw Ignite magnitude. Could you just, in a short term, explain what magnitude refers to?
Just a multiplayer on Ignite. So effectively, Ignite, I believe, by default, is like 25% of the hit. It does that. Oh geez, how exactly does the math work? Well, anyway, the bigger the hit, the more Ignite damage you get, and then magnitude effectively allows you to scale the Ignite, just a multiplier.
And this is like with Poison as well. It is.
Yeah, I believe
the hit determines the dot.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And then you get that. Yeah, exactly.
We had a few questions related to separate clients and be able to play both games at the same time. So let's say people will be able to want to play PoE 1 and PoE 2 at the same time. I'm assuming trading or something like that, you know?
They will be. You can do that. It's actually a bit weird. There might be like a few slight oddities when you do that with regard to when you change microtransactions and stuff. But it does work. It's something you can do.
Okay. Ultra wide resolution. For instance, I have a 49-inch monitor. Ultra wide resolution PoE 2. How's that looking?
So you can do up to. Sorry, hang on. How big are what's the ratio of those big ones? I believe that the biggest, widest monitor usually is like 29 by.
It's a weird, it's a weird one.
So whatever that number is, that's the big ultra wides.
Yeah.
So we do allow you to go up to that. If you go wider than that, it'll start to add black bars. I will say though that like QA are not routinely running around with one of these, so there can be cases where you get like pop-in, like maybe a few cases. It should generally work, but you just might get a few visual things. Just like I've noticed cases, for example, where it's like the level is not quite big enough. So if you stand in one corner, you might see off the edge of the level very slightly. Like in a few cases, like there's a few kind of like weird things around, but in general, it works fine. You know, it's just that it's kind of not something that we've been like going out of our way to fix little art issues in when there are issues.
Sure.
As genre defining things like minion summoners have been for the ARPG world, so is Cyclone. Spin to win. Are we going to see something like a spin to win skill in PoE 2 soon?
You will eventually. Just unfortunately, the exact Cyclone skill of just hold it down forever and just spin forever, we don't have in this version. It is on another class that will have that. There's quite a few other skills that involve swirling around and doing stuff though. So it's not like you're not going to have things similar, things like that monk skill, which is a little bit different with the twirling of the staff. It's sort of similar, but the true just like hold down forever and just channel spinning. That's on a different class that isn't in EA.
Okay. On another topic referring to PoE 1 is a spell totem. Will we see a spell totem in PoE 2?
You will see it. Do we have it in EA or not? I thought we did. Did we have it in EA or not? Well, look, you're certainly going to have it. The question is, will you have it soon? I'm actually not sure. I mean, look, it was on the skill list recently. Is it still on the skill list? Well, if you're asking, you probably isn't, right? So it's possible that it was removed from the from the Sork skill list if you didn't see it. But so it might have been cut temporarily. But look, it's been made. It's there. It's just like there must have been some issue with it if it's not there. So yeah.
Roger.
How about modifiers for maps that like brick the map, for instance, reflect, being eligible, elemental immunities, things like that, concepts for this for PoE 2?
So we do definitely have modifiers that are hard, and look, some modifiers will definitely be something that will be hard on your build. I don't think we've got Reflect, but there are mods that are hard. So it can happen, right? There are things like you've got to have certain things that your build can be good or bad against, I believe. It's notable though that the upsides and downsides work a bit differently, and because the upsides are prefixes and the downsides are suffixes rather than having them merged together. So that means the number of downsides that you face it will be lower because there's only going to be 3 rather than 6, and that means that each one is like a bit more sort of interesting in my opinion, as far as like you've got that issue with mod dilution where it's like if you've got 6 things affecting you, then you barely even notice them because, well, it's not that you don't notice them, but it's like each one is not like as important because there's 6 of them. Whereas when there's 3, it's like the 3 downsides actually matter quite a lot. So I think it sort of changes the gameplay around that quite a bit. Yeah, sure, there might be cases where mods can kind of brick your build, but try to avoid those if you can. I personally think it's interesting to be able to play around certain stuff like that sometimes. But yeah, we don't want to be as harsh as something like Reflect is, I would say.
Sure. One question that came up a few times was related to like an import-export, for instance, for skill trees. So for people who can effectively copy-paste builds in there. Is this a philosophy you guys are for, against, etc.?
So there's a feature that we never actually finished for this. It's in the game client, but I think probably disabled right now. So it's something that we did plan on doing. It's just that the UI for it was kind of crap and we didn't get time to finish it. But effectively, there was going to be a thing where you could make a .build file, which would effectively be like a skill tree layout that you could import. And effectively, it would work kind of like an item filter. We could throw it in a folder, and then the client would pick it up, and then you can select with a drop down which of the builds you want, and it just shows you the layout, and you can just allocate this point. So we are planning on doing that. We just kind of haven't got around to finishing it yet. So cool. Yeah, we'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Guide writers rejoice across the globe. From now till the early access launch, 6th of December, we're not that many days off, 12 days if my math is right. Yep. Teasers from now till then.
Yep,
can we expect it?
Yep, there's definitely going to be teasers. The community team have got a bunch of things, or at least they'll be making them. Yep, it is scary being so close. Like the big concern that I have is obviously server stuff now. Like my big concern is like, can we make sure that the servers are going to hold up? There's a lot of interest. Just looking at the the numbers I'm seeing from like supporter pack sales and so on, and like I think there's going to be a lot of people on day one. So my job now is going to be like making sure that that's going to be okay. I really hope we can do that because it's going to really suck if we get like launch day problems. Yeah, I'm worried we're going to be setting record numbers that will, be very hard to deal with. But we'll do our best, obviously. Yeah, that's going to be my thing to concentrate on going forward.
I want to just real quick follow up on that, because it sounds to me like you're almost surprised by the amount. I mean, obviously, you have a good product. You've been making a good product for a while, so you're not surprised you have a good product. But what I'm hearing is there's a lot of interest, maybe even more so than you were. Would you say this is accelerating a little bit larger than you guys originally anticipated, or how that's got to be encouraging, right?
It is. The thing is that I guess so. Obviously, when we get to open, full release, right? Obviously, the numbers there are going to be ridiculous because it's free. Anyone can play it. I guess the expectation was that because this was paid entry, and also like there's just a general feeling around early access that people have, where it's like, oh, maybe I'll just wait till the release. Like there's always this kind of feeling of like, I'm gonna wait. And I guess my feeling was that because of the fact we had both that and also the and also the fact that it wasn't, like you can't get in necessarily for free. I guess I was thinking like we would probably see sort of similar numbers to what we've seen in previous PoE launches. But yeah, I mean, just the number of people buying packs and so on, I mean, it's looking like it's going to be pretty damn huge. And I mean, look, obviously that was my goal, right? I wanted it to be large, and the part of the whole thing of having so much content in early access is literally to get this result, right? So on some level, I can't be too surprised. But at the same time, there's always those factors of like I was completely certain we were going to smash it out of the park with regard to the full release. I just wasn't certain that we were going to have records on records for concurrency on early access, and so it's looking like we will. That means we have to make sure that our servers are up to the jobs. And it's not really a question of like buy more servers. I mean, we can always do that. Although even that at some level of scale becomes tricky because like you can't just turn up to Amazon and be like, hey, we need like 5,000 servers out of nowhere. Like they're like there actually is some level of like of doing that. So we're doing that, giving you that all organized, but it's also just like the back end, right? Can the back end handle it? We have to write load testing stuff to kind of make sure that we can like try to simulate it, but then your simulations will never quite match reality. You never quite know will it actually work. So we're doing our best basically to try and make sure that's the case. But yeah, I think we can see a pretty significant amount of people turning up early access. It's looking like it's going to be very popular.
Can't wait. Last rapid fire question we have right now is equip gear even though the gear piece itself makes you fulfill the attribute requirements. There's actually one more question after this, but you know what I'm talking about. Let's say you have a pair of gloves, they have 20 dex, and if you unequip, then you can't equip the skill gem or whatever. Can you just switch that with another pair of glove with dexterity without that being a problem?
You can switch. You can swap them when you already meet the requirements on both. You can swap them between, and that will not break anything. But currently, if you have a piece of gear that will support itself, like if you have a piece of gear where equipping it would give you enough stats to support it, unfortunately, it doesn't currently let you do that. You have to find a way to get the dex first, and that is annoying. And we are planning on fixing it one day. We just haven't gotten around to it. It's just very tricky to implement. It seems like it's simple, but the problem is that to actually do it completely correctly, because there are stats that affect like that. I'm trying to think of one out of the top of my head, but it's like, if you have a stat, for example, that says something like this, that it doubles your dex, then immediately it's not just a question of like adding one and you actually have to effectively work out like, okay, what would the stats be on my character if I were to equip this thing, including all the changes that would occur from all the different mods on this thing. And then after you've done that, then it's like, well, now I've done that a fake simulation of that. Now I need to do that for real. And so it's like it's just a little bit tricky to actually organize doing that. So we will get to it one day because it's a feature that I'd love to have. But yeah, currently it doesn't work.
So the last rapid fire question we have, and I'll send you on out, is people were asking many times about DLSS support.
Yeah, we have that.
There you go. That answers that question.
Yeah. One thing I will say about it, though, just one detail, is that just to get a little bit technical here, because I used to kind of do engine programming stuff. The motion vectors we have, I don't think are as high quality as some games have, and we're using one of the DLSS profiles that's kind of supposed to be okay with that. It just means that some of the motion reconstruction may not be as good as like you get in some games. I think it's pretty reasonable, but honestly, I'm not a huge fan of DLSS myself anyway. Like I prefer the raw frames. I'm just that kind of guy, I guess. But yeah, we have support for it, and it works well. Like it's certainly the performance improvement that you're hoping for. It's just that the motion vectors for some things like, because I mean we're really spell heavy, right? And so spells are like all of those alpha transparent effects. That's like the worst thing for like upscaling. They're like that's where you have all the kind of issues. So that's kind of where you'd expect to see the kind of artifacting that you get from DLSS.
All right. Well, that's it. We won't take any more of your time. We'll just take those questions and go. Thanks for going, twice the length, really, that we expected to be here, 2 hours. Got a lot of good information. Is there anything you want to throw out at the end, just because we're about to wrap? Is there anything you want to say, ask, or,
Oh, I mean, I don't know, really. I think we probably covered everything. But, I just really hope everyone enjoys the game when we release soon. I'm just really keen. And as I said, I'm sorry if the servers fall over. Like, I'm really... I really, really hope we're able to get the servers to not fall over on release day. That's just my one goal now. So, yeah. We'll do our best.
All right, cheers.
Amazing. Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And all right, everybody, that was it. I'm going to go ahead and go get you off camera here. Thank you, Jonathan, for your time.
No problem.
And
let's have a chat.
GG.
All right, and then I'll go. I've got a meeting to go to. So yeah, see you later.
Cheers.
You do that.
Bye.
Have a good one.